All right, we ready to get started?
Sir.
Thank you for being here tonight, board. Thank you, people in the audience, for being here and your interest and concern about Williamson County Schools. Thank you very much. The first thing on the agenda is opening remarks, and I asked for that to be put on there so I could go over some things with you and some things to look forward to, some things I'd like to be doing. The first thing is, if you'll notice on your agenda. Oh yeah. All right. If you notice on the agenda, we have a timed agenda. I'll explain that in a minute, but Jason just reminded me, Dr. Looney is not here tonight because he had a death in the family out of state and he had to leave. And so, of course, our thoughts are with Mike, but that's why he couldn't be here. He had to leave. He called me. He had to go. All right, so he asked us to please just continue on and have the meeting. So that's where we are. The timed agenda is here. I want to explain about a timed agenda. Timed agendas are recommended by organizations to have board meetings flow, to give people an idea of how much time should be spent on an item, and to have a kind of like a stop and start point so people know, hey, this meeting should take about so long. What timed agenda is not is a lockstep thing that says you have to stop at that time. What is intended here is if it says, this is for example 10 minutes, and we get to the point where 10 minutes is up, then we ask, do you want to continue talking about this subject, or are we ready to move on? It is more of a way just to have the meeting flow. This is the way, when I was chairman before, it's the way I ran the meetings before, and it worked very well and organized. But please understand, it's not to say, that's it, we're cutting you off, because sometimes we will not be done, and many times it was, we need to continue talking about this item. But it also gives us the opportunity to say, hey, we've heard enough, let's just move on to the next item. So I've got that. The next thing I'd like us to be considering potentially at the next work session is electronic board meetings. The system provides us with computers. There are programs out there that allow us to get the information electronically, updated on the fly, to write notes to ourselves on those computers, and to keep them moving. Because right now we expect our students to function in an electronic world, and we bring your own technology, yet we as a board are not doing this. TSBA recommends it, NSBA recommends it, and of course other organizations do. So I asked them to put together, I put in here TSBA's e-meeting thing, so I only brought it here tonight to discuss it with you so we can consider it at next month's meeting. But there's material in here, there's multiple companies, I've looked at 3 of them, and TSBA's happen to be the least expensive, but not asking for any vote or anything tonight. I just would like us to consider going that route as we move forward. Another thing is committees and standing committees. There's basically one standing committee for the board, and that is the policy committee, and that's because our major responsibilities is to develop and run the district under policies. Other committees, as they have been named now, are really designed to function for a time and then to disband. And for lack of a better term, call them project teams or something along those lines. And for example, the legislative committee, as we have now, it's going to start up now. When the legislature is over, then we get a report, and then that committee just goes away. And because then we'll redo it next year and give us a chance to look at. So what it has basically is a beginning and an end. Athletic committee, the same way. It's starting up. It didn't complete its work last year. We still have some issues. We need to work through that, and then they make a final report at some time. There's no specific timeline, but it's a final report, and then we disband that. We've had the Athletic Facilities Committee has worked 3 different times under the project team status, and it worked very well. It functioned. Mark, you were part of that when we did it. It functioned really well. We went through it, and it finished up. Any questions on those particular things? Okay, thank you. Focus on our students. Would like us to always think about what impact or what we are doing, how does it impact our students? Make sure we always focus and we always look back at that fact is that we're looking, how does it impact our students, and what direct impact does it have on the school district? So I'd like us to always consider that as we go through things, and maybe redirect ourselves back on those type issues if we find ourselves getting off on a tangent somewhere. TSBA conference, we are now members of TSBA. TSBA conference is in November, and there's materials here about the conference coming up that was handed at your place tonight. How do we want to handle those registrations, ladies?
You can just let me know and I can add you to it. There is a cost, but I can do that.
Okay, it would be good if you've never been to one to go to the meeting and see the magnitude of things that go on there. So please let the staff know if you would like to go.
Deadline's tomorrow.
They did say deadline tomorrow.
Wow.
I think they'll.
I'm sure they will.
Since we're new at being a member again, I think they'd be willing to at least consider us maybe a day or two more. Next item is the acceptable media release and internet safety procedures. I have been reminded that we are supposed to sign this document since we are part of this. It's in your information at your desk too. Go ahead and read through it. And when you get a chance, resubmit it back so we have that on record. One thing I want to try to make sure is that Williamson County Schools, as you know, is the best school district in K-12 district in the state of Tennessee. I want to make sure that we are not used by other, I'll say, organizations or other people to distract us from our mission of doing what's best for our kids. So please make sure we continue to focus on our students and what we're doing. Basically, the way I put it, I don't want to be ground zero for every educational initiative statewide, whether it be academics, whether it be in how we handle busing, whatever. So I think for every board, it's healthy to stay focused on us. I've asked Mike every month to bring a department to us to review, for us to be updated on each department and what goes on in the departments. So this month we have a discussion on here, and Tim is here for discussion, even though next month is when Tim's going to come and talk about his department. But in looking forward in the future, to bring us all up to speed, because it's been a while since I've had heard each department, and for some of us who are new, we've never heard what each department actually does. So it's just a good idea to everybody get to hear what we're all responsible for. I think that's about what I have right now. Does anyone have any questions for me as we get started? Yes, ma'am.
I don't remember signing this last year. Is this new?
It was a new hire.
It was a new hire.
Was it?
One.
Okay, cool.
I just did it. So.
Thank you.
It was in that big stack.
Thank you.
Okay, well then let's get started on our agenda. The first item is board policy, starting on page 19. Mr. Squires.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board members, good evening. This is a second reading policy. You've seen this once before, and it's been through policy committee twice. The changes you see here are to bring it more into compliance with the regulations governing student schedules. There are some changes here that you see related to how a shortened day can happen for hardship of students. You all have had some discussion about that, whether it's measured by grades or by age. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions you all have, but you've seen this once before. No changes have happened since the last policy committee meeting.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, Bill, next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Policy 5.117, also second reading. This is a change brought forward by Ms. Rebecca Owens and her staff and me to bring the policy into compliance with the change in the law. If you see there the blue line 15 through 19, when you might send notice of non-renewal to an employee has shifted in the statutes. It's been measured a few different ways, and this is the most recent iteration of that by the legislature. Happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Is there a deadline by which teachers should receive notification, or has that been changed as well?
Notification of?
So again, prior notice was due by June 15th in the previous policy, so is there a date or deadline by which teachers should be
It's
notified?
5 days from the last day of school,
Yes.
within 5 days of the last day of school. That's what the change was.
The
Yes,
last
that's the change.
instructional day, okay.
15 through 19.
So obviously that would change each year depending on what the last day of school is.
And prior to that is actually a different date from June 15th. It's changed a few times over the last.
In the last 10 years, this is the fourth.
Yeah.
This is the fourth iteration of this.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Swears, next one.
Board Policy 5.403, also from Ms. Owens and her department. This is to bring a change into place about how drug-free workplace reporting obligations work. The current policy is written in a sort of unusual way. It requires reporting of employee convictions related to drug and alcohol issues that take place in the workplace, which is an odd way to say that, because if it happens in the workplace, we probably know about it. I mean, we should have been there. Most policies and most ordinances that address this kind of issue require reporting of these things that take place away from the workplace so that the employer knows. The changes you see here bring the policy into that sort of regulation instead. Happy to answer any questions you all have.
Questions on that one? All right, you're on a roll here, buddy. Next one, student records.
I'm being timed. I'm trying to move forward quickly.
It's working.
It's working. Mr. Chair, thank you. Board Policy 6.600. This is a change in the law or change in the statute to reflect a recent law passed by primarily Senator Gresham, but I know there were several others that joined in as well. It relates to how student records are collected, what kinds of student records can be collected. I think the act it has too many words, so I always leave one out. It's the Data Transparency something Accessibility Accountability Act. It's all about student data. The additions you see here, lines 7 through 20, are the things that are literally straight out of that statute. The department also is reviewing these policies. I need to add one additional piece of information for you all if you weren't at the policy committee meeting. You may have noticed the last time you saw this, there were 5 items listed there. One of them was Social Security numbers. What we discovered as we got into this was that we don't request Social Security numbers, but there is a small subset of students that we do hold Social Security numbers on because of the way the state runs its electronic system. We've tried a few different ways to get rid of those Social Security numbers, and it always triggers an error in the state system, so we end up being stuck with them no matter whether we want to or not. The change, I took it back to the way it had read before at line 3, that we don't request Social Security numbers, and that is true, we do not. We haven't in quite a while now. But it's a little bit inaccurate to say we don't maintain them, or that they're not occasionally part of the student's record. I believe Ms. Moss and I talked about this, and I think she estimated it was in the neighborhood of 10% of students. It's mostly those transferring in or out of the district for some reason. If they come from a district or from out of state where the social was used as the student ID number, we get stuck with that when they come, and we're unable to change that. I just want to make sure you all we're aware of that issue as we go forward. Happy to answer any questions you want.
I just had a couple of folks ask about this. If you could just restate, because the question was, where did it come from? This is directly from the state.
Well, it's from the legislature in the new act, the Data Transparency, Accessibility, Accountability Act. These things that you see being added is language from that act. The act actually says you will have a policy that says specifically these words. And we have, as you all know, we have quite a few records policies already, but this was new from the legislature, so we're having to add it to one of our policies.
And if I may add something to that, the policy committee spent a good bit of time running through all the information we had, trying to make sure that we weren't collecting anything that we didn't absolutely need. And so this policy is a reflection of that. The Social Security number, what we have found is it's usually in-state LEAs that started a child in kindergarten with a social, and the state has made that their identifier for testing purposes and all other identifier reasons. And there's no system yet that will allow a change in that identifier. That's the challenge we have with the state.
In fact, you all may be pleased to know the reason we know it triggers an error in the state system is because we actually changed it away from the Social Security numbers on our own, and then found out the hard way when the state said this doesn't work. So we were actually trying to get rid of the socials more than we were really allowed to do, and that's when we found out we're just kind of stuck with them for now.
Any other questions? Mr. Spark?
At our last meeting, I asked if any third party vendor was collecting any of this biometric data and information on students. So any testing, like if it's a state issued test or other test, if any of those were actually collecting any of this data on students.
I'm not aware of any that do, and these are such, if you look at this list, this is such an unusual list of things. I have never heard of any testing entity that we work with asking for these things. But that's, I didn't do any research. Mr. Gaddis, do you know?
No, the only, well, I think this was brought up last time, the only thing that would, in here that would have anything at all would be the eye tracking when they're getting vision screening. There may be something as a part of a vision screening, but that's the only thing I can imagine.
During your test.
No,
Exam.
no.
Eye screenings are something that we do as a sort of voluntary service at schools to help students that might have vision problems. So I imagine it's
I'm
part
not
of
really
that.
looking, I'm talking about like that.
Oh, I understand, but I just want to make sure,
Two.
I just want to make sure because of a lot of information that was initially put out regarding software requirements, it would lead a lot of people to believe that this type of data is in fact being collected
Yeah.
by someone or some entity.
Sure, and I'll just share with you, when, this is the second maybe year that Senator Gresham brought this forward, and I know when I saw it the first time, my initial reaction was, who asks for this information? That's just
I know it.
odd. I mean, who would ever ask a student their political affiliation? That's just bizarre. And so since that this act has been coming around, and discussions, I've never heard of anything we do that gets even close to this. Of course, I don't know what other districts are doing, so there may have been someone somewhere that did that. I don't know.
There's those four, but it's more, I believe, the biometric data.
Sure.
That was concerning, I know, to a number of parents.
Sure, sure.
Dr. Burgos?
The wording from 16 through 20 comes right out of the United States Department of Education. There's a paper. I did some research. I'm like, what the heck? Why would you get an EEG or a student biometric brainwave patterns? What in the world? So I looked it up to find out where it came from. And it's on the United States Department of Education website. There's a paper that they said, you know, if we collected all this data, maybe we could help figure out what a student would be best for in their vocation. It's experimental stuff. It's not going on as far as I am aware, but that's where it came from. And so I think our state is protecting our kids from being research experiments.
Great. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Move on to the next item, field trip requests.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Of course, this field trip request report comes to you monthly. The reason it's there is so that you can approve the fees, but of course we have a lot more information in there than is statutorily necessary. So we'll be happy to try to answer any questions if you have.
Any questions about the field trips? Seeing none? Next item, Ms. Coleman, budget timeline on page 35.
First of all, it is the 2016-17, not the 2015-16. The memo on 35 is just again showing the timeline on the back of it, the process that we're going through. As you can see, it's already started. And if there are no questions, that's all I have to say on it. We do use the strategic plan to guide the budget guideline. I mean, we just, now that we have the strategic plan, we've used that for several years to guide the budget.
Any questions on the budget timeline?
We talked about last year, and this might be in our annual board agenda, but we talked about moving the fees up to somewhere closer to January, February part, because the last time we approved the budget, and then in May we got the
Well, that
fees.
doesn't have anything to do with the budget.
Well, it could, but it could potentially.
No.
But it
That-
could if
that
we didn't
money
want.
doesn't-
If we didn't want to use fees, then we wanted to
Oh, I
use
see
the
what you're
budget to
saying.
pay the
I see what
fees.
you're saying. I don't know if the board did that.
Well, it's on the annual agenda for February.
February, okay.
February.
That's,
So we did move it up.
okay.
Any other questions on this one? Okay, thank you, Ms. Holman. Next item is facilities and construction update. Mr. Fortney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, board members. big thrust we've got going right now, of course, is Mill Creek Elementary and Middle School and Nolensville High School. I can tell you both of those projects are still tracking on schedule. Our budgets look good for them. We're 100% dried in at all three schools, which means the building is dry inside. That's a big deal for us because having water in the building is not a real good thing for construction purposes. So we're moving along fine. We're actually starting finishes in the high school and the Mill Creek School. By finishes, I'm talking sheetrock, painting, prepping of final finishes on sheetrock areas, installation of all the windows are installed now. Ceilings, as far as the skylights that we have in the high school, are installed and dried in. So they're moving along quite well. Our goal is to get some of the paving binder course down before the winter months set in, so we can have ample area for parking and so forth. If you haven't been out near the site, if you go by there, you'll see that the athletic light poles are being erected. So those are going in and it's all taking really good shape. We as I said, continue to make good progress and we'll continue to do so. Right now, that's all that's actively under construction. We've completed our contract punch list with the contractors on College Grove addition and also on, by next week we'll be done. We had a couple little issues over at Centennial with some exterior columns that we're not pleased with the finish, so they're going to refinish those in the next week. And Brentwood is now closed out. We are under design with the Fairview High School auditorium. That design is going to be very close to what you see at Brentwood. The auditorium lobby will be shifted a little bit because of the site constraints that we have, but all the rest of it will be identical to the other two that we've just completed, with the exception of the classroom space. Because each school is a little bit different, we're adapting part of the old automotive technology area into the classroom areas for the drama group at Fairview High School. So that is about the only big change that we see. Exterior of the building and layout is basically the same thing as Brentwood High School. I'm hoping to have that project bid in November if we can get through the State Fire Marshal's office, which I think we can since we've built it twice before. So we're looking in good health on that project. We've also got the Page High School, Page Middle School auditorium. That was one of the last of the middle schools. We've got two left, Heritage and Page. We had the funds to go ahead with the design on Page so we can be ready to go to the County Commission for funding as soon as that is done. They told us to bring it back at a later date, if you recall, back during the budget or capital request process. So that's where we are right now. Any questions? Be glad to answer.
What about Heritage? The Heritage design?
On the auditorium?
Yeah,
we haven't started that yet, and that site is a challenging site because there's not a lot of room out there. So we're still looking at the site, trying to figure out exactly where we're going to place that building.
Do we have the funds for the design as well?
Not at this moment.
So how was the decision made to do Page instead of Heritage?
The decision to do Page was the instructions that we got. That was the next one in line, and that was a directive I've got from our here in central office.
Okay.
Jason, you might be able to clarify something.
I really can't clarify that specifically. Of course, what we asked for was funding for all three theaters.
Correct.
And the county commission gave us sufficient funding that, as a practical matter, only allowed us to build Fairview. The design for Heritage and the design for Page is going to be parallel pretty much. So I can do a follow-up to make sure. The reality is what we're going to ask for is for those two to be concurrent projects. So I appreciate your concern that we don't want to get behind.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like if you have the design for one and you don't have the design for the other, it seems pretty obvious which one's next in line.
Yeah, you're right.
And, I thought the board ought to have a decision.
I agree with that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on that? Okay, Kevin, you talk about Brentwood United Methodist Church lease agreement at Sunset Middle School.
Yes, sir. Again, board members, on page 37, there is a memorandum from my office that recommends approval of a lease of Sunset for the gymnasium and cafeteria at the middle school side for Brentwood United, for what they're calling the Village Church, which is a satellite program of the Brentwood United Methodist Church. They meet the terms and requirements of our lease agreements. Copy of the lease agreements attached for your review, and this lease will start in January.
Questions on this one?
I have a question.
Yes.
I was wondering, just because I haven't seen these agreements before, how the lease rate is set. Is it standard across the county? Is it based on the usage that they're occupying?
The standard across the county as far as the space that they're occupying. We have a standard fee schedule on a rental amount for a specific space. We review that once a year, and if we see that our costs are increasing, we bring that to you for authorization to increase that rate. These leases are set up to where we can amend these leases every year for rate increases and such.
And more specifically, it's on the April annual agenda to review and potentially reset. The short version is we can't make a profit off it, but we can offset our costs, including depreciation.
Right, I read it as that they have the option to renew basically for 6 years at the same rate, unless they occupy more space.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Let me clarify for you. The rate is subject to increase based on the board's determination of when those rates go up.
Okay. Thank you.
So you'll know also, we also have a charge for WCS employees who monitor those buildings while they occupy them. We require one of our personnel to be in the building to supervise activities. And we also charge for custodial services to make sure the buildings are student ready the following day.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the lease? Okay, thank you, Kevin. Next item is Centennial High School renovation of teen living area into TV broadcasting classroom and studio on page 43.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. On page 43, another memorandum from our office requesting authorization to renovate a section on the second floor, which used to be what we call the teen living area. It's an area of it's a large space that presently has is furnished with kitchen ranges, vent hoods, sinks, cabinets, that sort of thing that never get used. That program is gone. It's just not a part of the curriculum any longer. The studio broadcasting program over at TV broadcasting program at Centennial is in a very small and confined space, and they have requested that they be moved to the existing space where teen living was, and there's some renovation that'll need to be taken or done to construct a new recording studio in a stage area or broadcasting area.
Any questions on that one? Okay, next item is Centennial High School baseball field replacement construction on the new home run fence. Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. This is another request for the metal home run fence to be installed at Centennial High School versus the chain link that's out there now. It's called the batter's eye. These enhancements have been made at numerous high schools. We've got them at Independence, Ravenwood, Summit, and now they're asking for it to be done at Centennial. The project is funded by the Booster Organization. We verified they have funds in place, and we require that they submit engineered drawings, and they're in the process of getting those stamped for us, and we'll monitor the construction. Staff recommends approval.
Anyone have questions on the baseball fence? Okay, I see none. Next item is Owensville High School construction of retaining walls. Courtney.
Again, thank you, Mr. Anderson, board members. The project, both Mill Creek and Nolensville High, are under what we call an ARAP permit. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's a Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation permitting process, which is an aquatic resources alteration permit. Anytime that we run into a situation that there is what used to be called a blue line stream, or waters of the state that intersect with any other proposed body of water, jurisdictional area that may be a tributary to a blue line stream, we have to have permission now from both TDEC and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. At Nolensville, we are constructing a right turn lane off of Nolensville Road onto the new Summerlin Drive to access the new high school and the middle school, elementary school. TDEC has determined that the drainage ditch along the east side of Nolensville Road is jurisdictional because it now enters into Mill Creek. So it's an intermittent waterway, to best put it, and some of the water comes from the farmland to the east. Some of the water comes off of Nolensville Road, which has been there a long, long time. We're trying to put that right turn lane in, and over the past almost 2 years now that we've been dealing with this site, the waterway has seeked its own direction and has encroached upon the eastern ditch, east side ditch of Nolensville Road. So to get that in there, we're going to have to support the right turn lane, we're going to have to put what we call a gravity wall. It's just a straight concrete wall that goes up along the side of it to support the turn lane. Well, to be able to do that, we have to do two things. We have to mitigate the area that we're now disturbing, okay? And we have to pay for the wall, and we have to, our mitigation process includes revegetating some other areas along Mill Creek, which is an 8-to-1 replacement. In other words, if we disturb one tree, or a foot of land, we have to replenish 8 feet of land. Does that make sense?
No, but we understand.
So there is a better description than what I'm giving verbally right now that I wrote in my memo, and I hope you can understand it. We're asking for an $80,000 authorization. We estimate the cost to be $74,290. We never know when we're going to run into some unsuitable soil or whatever, so we think we can do it for less than $80,000. But we need to move forward with it so we can get the road completed.
Can we use the fence we tear down from Centennial Baseball?
No, because we're tying on to that fence to support the building. I wish we could.
Any other questions for Mr. Horton? All right, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
The next item is the superintendent's report. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first bullet point is the strategic plan report for technology, planning and zoning and finance. We have placed on the annual agenda each of the 6 elements of the strategic plan. We have reports in your board packet. The truth is, a lot of this is redundant because we spent a good amount of time at our retreat just this past month talking about our strategic plan in detail, but we are still governed by this annual agenda, so we included some additional reports for you. I will tell you also that Dr. Looney, as you may recall, said that he was going to finalize and clean up the language of the revised strategic plan after the retreat. He's still working on that, and we'll make sure we get that to you. I can't give you an exact date as I'm sitting here, but I wanted you to be aware of that. Next, I wanted you to know that we have gotten the master plan agreements to Goodwill Mills and Kaywood for both Franklin Heights campus and the Brentwood Middle High campus based on last month's board decision. Their timeline is about 6 months, which includes some community meetings, and so they are really in the very early stages of doing their internal work. as they're trying to prepare something that will meet our needs. And many of you board members were involved in some of those detailed discussions with that architectural group to get that started. So as we progress through this into next month and the month after, you all will be getting some more detailed information once they get their work done on that plan. I also wanted to let you know that Dr. Looney, Leslie Holman, and I met the day before yesterday with Mayor Anderson and some members of his staff. You may recall that not in the most recent commission meeting, but the meeting before that, the commission agreed to allocate $100,000 towards their study of some capital planning across the county. We met with them to try to make sure that we did not overlap efforts in the things we were doing with the things they were doing. And that was one point of emphasis that we actually took from our visit to Austin, Texas, to see how they would handle growth. That if there's a lot of chefs, they all ought to be in the same kitchen, not in different kitchens. And so as we sit here today, a day and a half after our meeting, we're not ready to come to you with a proposal to pay somebody $250,000 to do a study. We're doing some work with the county mayor to try to figure out what is the most optimum way to do some planning. And it may ultimately include hiring somebody to actually do work jointly rather than simply commissioning some out of county group. That's a possibility as we're going through the brainstorming. So the reality is we're still at that early brainstorming stage with the county mayor's office over how to cover everything. Just want to give you that update because I know you might have been wondering about the plan that I emailed to you 6-8 weeks ago that we're still working on. That covers the strategic plan report. Does anybody have any questions related to that? All right, next on Dr. Looney's agenda is the rezoning proposal for 2016-2017. As you know, that's on page 69. We have not recommended anything different from what we were projecting we would likely recommend when we spoke to you about this last month. And so my memo is on page 69. I did want to let you know from a number perspective, the Dallas Downs subdivision is in this proposal to go to Winstead. And you can see that in there. Dallas Downs has currently 56 students at Oakview Elementary, and they're fairly evenly broken out over every grade level. It ranges from 8 to 11 students per grade level. The board policy allows for rising fifth graders to grandfather in when we rezone, and their siblings. And so our experience typically is most families, if it's just that final year in a particular school, tend to choose to stay. And then it of course trickles off on siblings, as time progresses based on the family's needs. High schools are especially really lock in on that. But like every one of our schools, Oakview is special to the folks who live there. Winstead is special to the students who are at Winstead, and I think that's a truism from our county. And so my experience is that every time there's a rezoning, it's a painful proposition to change. But when students get to the school they're at, they're very happy. I will tell you in other parts of the state and this country that's not the case, but for what it's worth, that's been my experience. From a procedural standpoint, we're not asking you guys to vote on it this month. We are going to have this on the agenda for a vote in November. In the meantime, we want you to percolate on it, think about it. We're going to schedule a community meeting after this upcoming board meeting, and we'll give you notice at our Monday, October 26th board meeting of the date that we're projecting for that. We want to have at least one meeting. I will tell you also that Mark Gregory, who is a board member who lives in that area, has been proactive in this, and he's actually already had a meeting with some members of the community. I've heard second or third hand that it was a really good dialogue. I've heard some praise. I've heard some praise from Mr. Gregory for scheduling that from some folks in the community. I don't, I'm not.
Well, I'll be happy to get what happened. It was Monday night, and we had close to 200 people were there, which was a huge turnout. I was expecting 30 to 40. Had to use a PA system, but They were very courteous and very respectful of the process. And they had some very good ideas that they shared with me. Tom Morris and I went over some numbers before the meeting, and Tom projected 40 kids would probably go because of grandfathering out of the 56. Based on the conversations that we had, I told Mike that I support moving Dallas down to Wednesday, and I do, long term. But what I want to talk to you guys about and just hash it out a little bit. When I look at things like this, I look at the district as a whole, Williamson County Schools, and what effect it's going to have on us. And then I look at what effect it's going to have on the ground. This won't do anything for us to relieve Oakview's overcrowded. We won't lose a portable. Wednesday will pick up a couple classes, but I would rather, and that's where I am right now on this, I would rather postpone this until we open the 2 new schools that are projected down Price Lane, because then it would be a big rezoning and it would be more, I think, accepted and not be looked at as a spot rezoning. That's really, I don't think would be achieving what we're trying to achieve. But if we wait and do it then that whole southern section will be moving. And so they'll be, and I did tell the folks there that it's inevitable that they will be going to Winstead. I just don't think it makes enough sense to me to support doing it this year. But we'll have the meetings and go through it the next month. But that's where I am right now.
On the practical side, what I project is if we do wait, we're probably looking at 1 portable more than we were projecting in that memo I had given you guys about a month ago. So that's the practical impact on us. Denise Gooden may have some more details to give you all at some later point, maybe at the next work session related to that.
Sorry, Dan.
I've got a question on the sewer line. We've got, where's Kevin? We've got 35 acres over there
Yes, sir.
at Oakview. Roughly $1.5 million to put a sewer line in.
I spoke with the engineers over at City of Franklin, and they put some numbers together for me about a month ago, 30 weeks ago. The number they came up with to put a force main from the school all the way over to where they can intercept at Barry's farm was like $1.8 million to $2 million.
Still, with 35 acres, is that owned outright by the school system?
Yes.
Yes.
To me, it's just plain old common sense to have the sewer put in and build there, or add on, or whatever. Rather than, I mean, people in that area have been talking about a, middle school and K through 8 and whatnot. It doesn't make sense to me to be spending millions of dollars on property elsewhere in building schools when you've got 35 acres there that we can put into use. Now, is there code problems and issues with the city of Franklin on that, or, I mean, is this something that can be done?
From my understanding from the City of Franklin, it can be done based on the cost estimate that they provided.
So we just need to go to the county commission and ask for a couple more $1 million, right?
I will tell you.
Or Leslie can pull it out of her hat.
I will tell you one opinion I've expressed to Dr. Looney over the years is, from a zoning perspective, I'm concerned about that site as a middle school site because of its proximity to Franklin Special School District. It makes zoning difficult because what you've got is a zone that's going to have to be kind of structured like that with a middle school near the top. It's not as big an issue for elementaries because elementaries are smaller and more dense.
Well, but where are they going
zones.
now?
Yeah, right. Well, right now they're going to Heritage Page and yeah.
So
You got Nature's Landing and River Bluff that haven't even built a house yet. You got Stream Valley right down the road. And whoever else is gonna sell property, that's where the building's going down there. So regardless of what we put in, it's gonna be utilized.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think it's wise, and maybe that can be something we bring up with the, the commissioners and whatnot on growth when we have another meeting.
That'd also be a benefit of getting sewer to Oakview Elementary as well.
Yeah,
That plant's pretty much at maximum.
Yeah,
capacity.
you're right, we do have a plant there that's really at capacity, and it's an older technology, and it's not gonna be, it's not something that would ordinarily be used in that way. From a plant perspective, I know Kevin's done some studies, we could probably get that to you in November and give you an analysis with a recommendation for whether it's truly feasible to do a full-blown middle school on that site versus doing a K-8, which is where Dr. Linney is right now. I will say, we have had, as you know, Dr. Linney has mentioned this, we've had some pretty serious discussions with a property owner off Clayton Arnold Road. We think that's a really good location. And also, we've got sewer there. Now, the reality is you pay for sewer one way or the other, right?
Right.
Because when sewer's there, the value of the property jumps significantly. And so the reality is we're gonna pay for that somehow. But we're pretty close to making a nailed-down offer contingent on board approval. We anticipate we're gonna bring something to you in November for your approval. We have a draft contract that includes that contingency, and also, of course, contingent on commission funding the property. So we'll make sure that we address your concern in some detail over the next month before we bring something to you in November with a recommendation.
Well, that's feedback I'm getting from constituents,
Yeah.
and have been getting,
Mhm.
and it's common sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, there's some pluses and minuses.
well,
But back to Mark's question, and the possibility of suggesting a delay, is the only impact that a delay would place on us is a portable? Is that it?
Well, I can't answer that fully because that's an academic question that probably ought to be addressed from the academic folks. But the reality is when you put more students in a building, it stresses common areas, et cetera. So it kind of depends on the growth in that area over the next few months. I'm projecting one, but potentially 2 extra portables. And that the money side of that, you're looking at around $15,000, including the transport plus the rental. But I'm confident there's an academic impact. I just can't give you details about that.
Can we find out and?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Grandfathering sometimes gets confusing, but for everyone that's here and everybody that's watching live stream, can you give us an example of a family who might have a 4th grader and a 1st grader?
Yes. The way the board policy is structured is that the rising student of the highest grade level of the school during the rezoning will be able to grandfather in to finish that school. And actually at the high school level, it's 11th and 12th. The theory would be that, you shouldn't, if you've already gone halfway through a high school, you can finish up. And actually on that point, that's one of the reasons why we start with 2 grade levels at our new high schools. There's a lot, but that's an example. Your siblings can also grandfather in. And the policy reads that if you have more than one sibling who would be in the school at the same time, then those siblings can grandfather. So elementary school has 6 grade levels, K through 5. So if you had children who were 6 grade levels apart, meaning you had somebody who's not yet reached kindergarten and you had a 5th grader, and that 5th grader matriculated out, there would be no grandfathering for that next sibling because they would not be in school together at that school. That younger student would pass to the rezoned school. But if you had a staggered group of siblings, and you had one who happened to be in 3rd grade, one in kindergarten, another one who's 3 years old, and they had a 5th grade sibling who they grandfathered in with, that entire family could continue because at some point there is more than one child in that school. And so the reality is sometimes with large families, the grandfathering provision can continue on over the course of many years. That's more true at the elementary school than it is at the middle or high because there are 6 grade levels at the elementary school. So we're 5 years out from our last rezoning, and every year you see that number of out of zone because the grandfathering dropped just a little bit.
Jay.
So, is there a possibility that we could give them some some certainty to what Mark was saying, that yes, we are gonna rezone you, and I guess we would wait to make sure that we were building the new property, so we know that is actually true. That obviously somebody's going to have to get rezoned to the new school, but we're going to move you to Oakview, but it's going to be effective 2017, 2018 instead of, or whatever the year is, whenever the school opens, and so we make that a certainty, and we focus on the open zoning and say, because we always target open. I'm sure Winstead's open zone now, but right now there's 5 students that are open zone, that are out of zone, that are zoned Oakview and go into Winstead. But I'm sure that the kindergarten, first, second graders who know that they're going to eventually go over there, they might actually want to go ahead and go to Oakview, versus the ones who are going in the second, third, fourth, fifth grade might choose to stay because they've been there and they want to grandfather in. But the ones who aren't going to grandfather might choose to go ahead and go, so they can go ahead and jump now. It might land you 10 or 15 kids, but that's 10 or 15. We're only talking about 40 here, so it's not going to cause a huge problem either way. So.
Well, and that is an argument for that. My thinking is, if it's inevitable, why delay? Because you can give some relief. Winstead has room, even though in the first year it might not be a huge relief, it will be some relief to the overcrowded in Oakview, knowing that we're still growing. But I see your point that if somebody knows 2-3 years ahead of time. Now, busing is an issue. A lot of folks choose to grandfather and have to. Of course, you provide your own transportation. I can't speculate on how many would choose to transport their children as a kindergartner when they have the option of having the bus before the rezoning. I just don't know. It's just hard to guess that.
Could we ask?
Well, we can't ask rising kindergartners because we don't know who they are.
Agreed.
So, could it be? Could we ask current kindergarten, first and second? Potentially, yes.
PJ.
Thank you. I do believe that the reason why we're talking about this now, I think, is because of the new lots that are going in River Bluff and Nature's Landing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so we want to have them, before the houses are built and people move in and they get rezoned later, to have them zoned based on so, and the thought was that if we did that, if we just rezoned the new lots, then we'll have an island in Dallas Downs, and which is a little weird, but it's not undoable. But I'd say, if nothing else, and I appreciate you talking to us, Mark, about this, because each one of us represents the district and knows our districts better than the rest of us. So I appreciate your expertise on what your community is looking for and sharing that with the board. And I was just wondering, if nothing else, we really ought to, even if we do create an island, at least zone the new lots.
Oh, absolutely.
That's my thought,
I'd
yeah.
absolutely tell them they're going to Winstead for sure.
Right. Thanks, Mark.
Any other questions or comments on that? All right, if you want to talk for a moment, everyone.
Yeah, just as a reminder, especially, and also for the folks who are watching who might not be aware, in the Nolensville Sunset area, and that's actually shown on the first map after page 70, Eula's Grove, we talked about this last month, is being developed on a tract that was actually had road frontage on Britton Lane, which was part of the Nolensville Elementary School Zone when we rezoned to Nolensville. A developer now has it, and the design does not include the road frontage work as much as it includes connecting it to an existing neighborhood in kind of a horseshoe connection that really makes it part of those neighborhoods that are already in the Sunset Zone. So we do recommend that we go ahead and rezone that to Sunset before any homes are built as well.
Do you have any questions on that one?
So does it have access to Britton Lane and to Sunset?
As I understand it, it is really just going to be a continuation of the two roads that you see to the immediate left of the white box of Euless Grove, down to the road which is due south of that white box. It will just be a curve that connects those two roads.
Okay. So it won't have access to
Correct.
Okay.
If you're driving from the west side, the homes will be on your left, just like any neighborhood. Am I incorrect about that?
It doesn't come down to Sunset Road,
Okay.
but it will have access up to Britton Lane.
Okay, so it's gonna have both.
Is that what you just said? Is it gonna have both?
It's gonna connect Sunset Park and Britton Downs with an access point out on Britton Lane. So that's why the second map was drawn like it is.
So will it have access? Will it have access to Sunset Road?
It will not have access to Sunset Road except through Britton Downs.
Well, it will.
Right, through,
yes.
right.
The answer is yes to your question.
Right, okay.
You could drive from Sunset Road into Britton Downs and go through that neighborhood.
Because the whole reason Britton Downs was, is Britton Downs the green area here? Because that originally was zoned to Nolensville.
That's right.
And the reason it got zoned to Sunset was this little road that connected to Sunset, and the fact that they were going to have to pass by Sunset, and that didn't make any sense. So this neighborhood was originally Nolensville and got moved to Sunset, and so to me the very important point is if this is ultimately a part of Britton Downs, then it makes a lot of sense. But if it's not, then it can stay. So
yeah. And so, Allison, correct me if I'm wrong, the way I describe that is it's going to be connected to and part of the natural flow of Britton Downs, even though it's called something different. And so from a busing perspective, that bus will just go through Britton Downs, have another stop in the Euless Grove area.
yeah, that's fine.
They're not gonna wanna go back out to Nolensville Road and go south and come in. They wanna go that way. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item on the superintendent's report is the social studies report, and Chairman Anderson mentioned that to you, and Tim Gaddis has a short presentation for us.
I will make this a pretty short presentation because I want to be able to answer all the questions that you might have. Just a few days ago, Mr. Anderson and Dr. Looney asked me to give you some background, some context for kind of where we are on our middle school social studies curriculum, and specifically the issue of religion as a part of that curriculum. You know, I probably don't need to say all of this, but the study of history is certainly not just a chronology of events. You know, it includes our culture, it includes our art, it includes our science, our politics, everything. It's the story of our lives. And so, any historian is going to tell you that there aren't any cultures in history that haven't been influenced by their religious traditions, whatever those traditions might be. And so, the Tennessee Social Studies standards for decades now have included religious content. And one of the things that I've looked back as far as I could, there's some things, you know, you can't find these books anymore, but I looked back as far as I could, and it's interesting that the content of those standards has been remarkably stable over several decades, with the exception of modern events or recent events being added. The content of our social studies standards, it stayed pretty much the same. Now, there was a big change, though. There was a revision of the social studies standards, and I want to kind of explain the chronology of that because it's important in terms of understanding our 6th and 7th grade. In July of 2013, the Tennessee State Board of Education approved on second reading a change to the social studies standards. The changes were, there were really two areas where the changes were sort of noticeable and big. One of those was that students would read many more original documents in their original form and write about those documents citing evidence on prompts. So you'd see a lot of that that got added. But specifically at the middle school level, there was a change in the organization of how we're teaching social studies. Prior to 2013, in grade 6, students studied world history. And they studied it all the way up through from early civilizations all the way up through the European exploration of the Americas. So you can imagine how fast they were going through 6th grade there. Then in 7th grade, they studied geography as a separate course, and then in 8th grade, they did U.S. history. And so that was kind of the way the middle schools worked at that time. What was determined, a lot of educators from here in Tennessee, some of the folks, we had folks from our district who were a part of the committee that worked on this. There were some from Franklin Special who worked on the committees. But they kind of rethought that, and they said, you know, we don't want to separate geography out from the history, that's an artificial kind of a division, and we really ought to be joining those together. So what they did was they changed it so that grade 6 and grade 7 are world history, and then grade 8 is the U.S. history portion. So grade 6 and grade 7 essentially are two halves of the same course. And you have to kind of look at them that way. So in grade 6, our students study from early civilizations through the fall of the Roman Empire. And then in grade 7, they pick up, they actually do a quick little review with Rome. The Byzantine Empire is their first unit, really, and they go all the way through the early European exploration of the Americas. And that's where it stops. There's no modern history in 6th and 7th grade. It stops with just about with Columbus, right about that time. And so that's what's covered during that. Now that work was done all through that year prior to July of 2013. That's when the state board gave its final approval. Then in the winter and early spring of the 13-14 school year, so several months later, that's when we went through that textbook adoption for social studies. And then I want to say it was in March, but it could have been in April, that the school board approved the selections that were made by those committees. And those were committees that were, at that time, made up exclusively of teachers, by the way. Those were all the folks who had votes at that time. So we adopted those, and so the first time those books were used then would have been last school year in 14-15, and this is our second year of using those books. Here in Williamson County, we follow the state standards. We don't. We're not adding a lot of stuff to the state standards. We just don't. And you have copies of the scope or you have the scope and sequence. It's there on your. It's on the website, of course, and you can get to it there. Some of you I've had an opportunity to sit down with, and so we've kind of walked through the scope and sequences, so you know what's there. In those 2 years, we do cover the 5 major world religions. And I have to add there, we also cover a variety of other localized, more localized belief systems and religious traditions. So those are mentioned as well. But there are 5 that we cover as a part of those standards. I always say this to anybody who wants to listen to me, and I can tell you that our teachers could recite this. The first rule is that we always treat every religion respectfully. That's an absolute. And the second one is we never ever proselytize or advocate for any religion. That's simply not happening in Williamson County schools. So those are our most basic rules. In your board packet on page 77, I had prepared for you just the references to religion in our actually beginning with kindergarten all the way through the 8th grade, because I thought it would be helpful for you to see those. I do want you to understand, though, when you look at those tables, that's not the scope and sequence. Those just happen to be references to religion. Religion is only, those religious references make up only a small part of the curriculum for social studies. I mean, you've got to think about this. They're covering thousands of years during that time. These are survey courses. They're not depth courses. So they're moving pretty rapidly as they go through those. But if you'll look at those, I just quickly would want to point out, if you look at page 78, when you get to 6th grade, that's where we start to see those 5 religions mentioned. And you'll see the second column that you have there is the quarter. We've divided the year into 4 quarters. And so you see that during the second quarter, we begin our discussion of ancient Israel. You'll see some of the kinds of things that are covered there. And those reflect the Tennessee standards, basic tenets of Judaism, the 10 Commandments. It's all there. And that's in the textbook as well. And so you can look at those things. We do then, very late in the second quarter, we do a little bit with Hinduism and Buddhism. We don't do as much there as we do with Judaism, but we do cover those as well. And then when you get to the 4th quarter, that's when we spend time with Christianity. And again, if you will look at the standards, and you'll see at the top of the page 79, key Christian concepts are a part of that work. So then you're going to get to, still on page 79, you're getting to the grade 7, and in the first quarter of so we've covered 4 of them now. In the first quarter of grade 7 is the last one, and that one's Islam. And you'll see what we've done with that as well. So you've got a record of where these things are being introduced as a part of the work. I will say, if you look at the last page, however, or page 80, I'm sorry, page 80, you'll see that by the time we get to the 3rd quarter of the 7th grade, we're pretty focused on European history. And you'll see that, of course, you can't teach European history without really including a good deal of church history as well as a part of that. So that's what I have for you in terms of just some basic context, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, as we talked about time and agenda, we are over the 30 minutes. We'd like to add some time to this discussion.
Yes.
Anybody else? Okay with adding time? Okay. I'm thinking we should add time to this discussion since it's been. Any other questions for Tim? Okay. Dr. Burgos had talked to me about over a week ago, will this be on the agenda, this discussion? And I said, yes, I had asked for it to be on the agenda. And then she commented she was going to put together a resolution, and you have tonight the resolution that she has put together. Dr. Burgos, can you go ahead and tell us about the resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Gaddis, for that excellent overview of our Williamson County scope and sequence. And as I present this resolution for your consideration, let me first say that neither I nor this resolution accuses any of our teachers or administration of attempting to indoctrinate our students. I continue to acknowledge the fact that we have the highest caliber of teachers and staff whose dedication has placed our school district at the top of our state. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. I'd like to give you just an overview. I won't read this to you. I hope you've had the opportunity to look at it before tonight. That's why I provided it a few days back. This resolution accomplishes 4 key items. First, it acknowledges the concerns expressed by Williamson County parents and taxpayers regarding the alleged indoctrination of Islam in Tennessee public schools and across the nation. As you probably know, it's a hot topic right now. Secondly, it promotes parental accountability at both the local and the state levels through access to and review of all instructional materials and assessments. Thirdly, it affirms our role as school board members to thoroughly vet all textbooks and supplemental instructional materials to make sure that they are free from religious bias or any inaccuracies, as in Tennessee Code 49.6/2207. And lastly, it requests that the State Board of Education and our legislators revise and clarify our social studies standards and make available state-mandated assessments for review to confirm that students are not being tested on their knowledge of any religion. Now, the reason that I felt a resolution was in order is I had the opportunity to review and compare the 6th and 7th grade social studies textbooks, Pearson's My World History and Geography, and I met with both J.C. Stewart and Tim Gaddis, and I really appreciate them taking the time to do that. They met with other board members as well. They have, of course, reassured me, like they did you, that our teachers have been instructed to spend equal time on each unit, and I do not doubt that. But in reviewing the state standards, I had some issues, and at the state level, I found some inequalities as pertaining to the world religions. And I'm going to briefly compare how many pages and how many standards for just the 3 units of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, for brevity. And he just went through a lot of this, so I'm not going to say when it was taught. Judaism, there are 53 pages on the unit of Judaism and the Jewish people. That's in 6th grade, pages 166 through 189, so there's 53 pages. And there are 6 state standards that have to be taught during that unit. The Christianity is tied in with the Roman Empire at the end of the 4th quarter, pages 386 through 413. That's 26 pages. And there was 1 state standard. It covers a lot, but there's 1 state standard for that particular unit. And then in 7th grade, the 1st quarter, the Islamic Civilization Muslim unit, pages 72 through 107 are 35 pages. There are 10 state standards that our teachers have to teach in that particular unit. So Judaism, 53 pages, 6 state standards. Christianity, 26 pages, 1 state standard. Islam, 35 pages, 10 state standards. So I see some inequality there, and that's part of what's in the resolution. And then the second issue to me was content. Just skimming through the content in each unit, there are no glaring errors on a first reading. But what becomes startling to me as I dug deeper, because I'm not an expert in Islam, I had to dig to understand, was that what was missing. And it wasn't just in the Islam section. For example, I'll give you 2 examples for brevity. I don't want to, there are several reviews, by the way, online from when the textbook advocates did a lot of reviews of these textbooks, those 2 years ago, up at the state. And they're quite impressive, and I'm not going to go through them all, but they gave me a lot of information. I'd be happy to share them with anyone. They're online. Okay, my first example of content that I felt was missing was, the first one was in the unit on Judaism. There is not 1 mention of the Holocaust. On page 185 of the 6th grade textbook, there's a small picture of Anne Frank as a young girl, and the caption reads, "Anne Frank, a Jewish girl killed because of prejudice." And that's it. I was shocked. I looked for the content to go with that. There is none. Roughly 6 million Jews were murdered in death camps, as you know, during the Holocaust, representing 90% of the Jewish population in Europe at that time. So I would think it would be worth mentioning in their history in that section. The second was the unit on Islam. There was not 1 mention on all of it of the word jihad. It's estimated that 270 million people have been killed by Muslim jihadists. Now, I recognize that not all Muslims are terrorists. Please hear me clearly. or violent. However, it's also a fact that the majority of terrorist groups are in fact Muslim. How are our children to reconcile what they are seeing happening in the Middle East when they're not even exposed to the radical sects of Islam like ISIS? They are known as the Islamic State. How are they to understand why the entire Islamic country of Iran openly vows to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, and Christians are being beheaded and crucified in Syria and Iraq as we speak? Those terrorists are convinced that they are doing the will of Allah, as demonstrated by their declaration, Allah Akbar, just before they murder people. The expression means Allah is the greatest. In order for our children to develop critical thinking, I believe they must have all the facts. I did get several calls from parents. I got a couple emails, but the calls were more, people don't always want to email. They want to pick up, and they're afraid to talk about this. I talked with a parent today. I had spoken with her once before, from one of our middle schools right here in Williamson County. I'm not going to name the school, not going to name the child, it's irrelevant. But it was here. She contacted me and said that the interaction between her child and her teacher during the Muslim unit of study alarmed her, that they were not teaching the whole truth about Islam. She shared with me her child's handout that had a fill-in-the-blank exercise that read, Muslims, blank, non-believers, or blank, people to blank. And that doesn't make sense unless I tell you, of course, the blanks. But it was Muslims didn't, and the fill-in-the-blank was persecute non-believers or people to convert. And they were also asked to draw pictures, and this child drew a picture of a terrorist about to chop off the head of a Christian who was on his knees praying. And the child asked the teacher, what about ISIS? To which the teacher replied, ISIS are not Muslim. They are a terrorist extremist group. To which the child replied, yes, they are Muslim. They are following the Quran. They even kill other Muslims who don't follow the Quran. She had been educated at home. I think her father, in fact, is a preacher, so they do a lot of religious training at home. The truth is that that child is right, and the statement that Muslims, and specifically their Prophet Muhammad, respected Jews and Christians is not true. On page 79, I would consider jihad persecution of non-believers. And both the Quran and history tell us an entirely different story. I don't need to read you quotes from the Quran. I have them here if you want to, but there's no doubt that that is, in fact, true. So I did feel, and so did the reviewers of that textbook, in summary, that with regards to the Islam section of this textbook, it rises to a half-truth at best. There's constant apologist bias in refusing to talk about Islamic cruelty. The text is more like propaganda than critical thought applied to history. I'm reading off one of the person's review of this, Dr. Bill French. The missing pieces are massive in scope. The suffering caused by slavery, jihad, dimitude, and the Sharia annihilated the native civilizations of Egypt, North Africa, Lebanon, Syria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Turkey. Jihad has murdered over 270 million people, but no hint is given. The text does not speak of the Islamic basis for slave trade that supplied the slaves who came to America. I will stop there. It gives you an overview of why I feel we have a concern in that textbook. And I would be open to any feedback about this resolution and further discussion.
Yeah.
So I would just, a couple of clarifications. You're right. You won't find any mention in the 6th grade book of the Holocaust, because remember, our 6th, 7th grade curriculum ends at about 1500. So it's not going to include that. But if you look at our high school world history courses, you'll certainly find fairly extensive material there. So that's why you wouldn't find much, certainly, on that. I really can't comment on the other issues. I would say, in counting the standards on Islam, it is important to look at what the standards are. I mean, the very first one is a geography standard, talking about the Arabian Peninsula. That's really not That's not a religious standard. There is a second one, though, that talks about the expansion of Muslim rule through conquests and cultural diffusion of Islam in the Arabic language. So there is actually, there is quite a bit of text there that talks about how Islam did spread, especially across North Africa, and then finally sort of into Spain before they were, before there was some driving back. There are 3 standards here, and I know we had this discussion. There are 3 standards here that I think you could make the case are in any way talking about the faith itself. The rest of these really are talking about conquests and geography and contributions such as algebra, the concept of zero, those sorts of things.
Right, I was just comparing, they're not there in the other units, you know, for the Christianity, and because those are specific units that they're addressing.
And I would agree, except that in the 7th grade curriculum, once we get to the Renaissance, the church pretty much gets credit for everything. So there's a lot there in that 7th grade curriculum once we get to European history.
Any other questions, comments?
I've got a question. We brought forth a resolution to create our own standards back last year. I haven't heard an update on that, where the Common Core and these standards are being developed, and we're doing science first, correct? The science book, developing new standards for science.
The state.
Science.
The
It's the state level, yes.
The state is in the
I'm talking
process
at
of
the-
that.
I'm talking at the state level.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we go into the English language arts next year.
Let's see, they are working on, I always have to kind of say this to make sure I get this. They're working on the science standards right now. They are about to begin, I think they're beginning in January. They're going to start the review of the social studies standards. They move that up.
Okay.
But that's not, those reviews of standards are not the same as the adoption cycle. So what's happening is this year, next month, I'll be bringing you some stuff about CTE, because there are CTE courses. Next year will be another group of CTE courses, and the year after that's going to be science. So in terms of adoption years, we've got this year, next year, and then the science after that. So what will happen is those science standards will have had time, you know, they've been revised. They're all Tennessee educators working on them. They will have been through the public comment process. The state board will have adopted them, and then we'll be ready to adopt. So it'll be ready in advance of that.
It seems like it's getting pretty far out there as far as years go.
It takes quite a while for them to do that in order to make sure that they're allowing time for all the public comment. And, I mean, they use several months for that, but they do try and plan those out. I will tell you one thing that's a change is that they've decided to move the textbook adoption cycle to a 5-year cycle rather than the 6-year cycle that we've been on for, gosh, years and years. I don't know how far back. I don't know when we had another number, but they've shrunk that down. It's probably a great idea in order to be able to do that. As you know, things happen. It's going to be more expensive because you're buying new text every 5 years now rather than every 6.
Well, I guess my thoughts on a resolution like this is much like the resolution we brought forth last year to create new standards. I think something like this should be brought to the legislators as a resolution for them to start looking at this and really dissect this. And I don't believe in Williamson County anyone is making their students do things in a religious way. I just don't see that. But the facts are out there throughout the state that it is happening big time, and the nation. So this may be an opportunity to put forth a resolution like this, you know, just to go on up and just put some of this in check for investigation and whatnot.
Mine's gonna take a second, to go on Dan's point. Whether it's a state issue or a national issue, it's a state or a national issue. It is not a Williamson County Schools issue, because it's not happening here. We haven't had any field trips to mosques. We haven't had indoctrination. We haven't had any of that. The resolution last fall should be overarching, and should cover anything, because we're in support of local control. It was unanimous. We said we want local control. Any issue, this or any other issue, that resolution should cover it. This is a political issue, and I'll go to a couple of points that Dr. Burgos mentioned. WCS parents, as an HR, as a human resources professional, there are 3 rules in human resources: document, document, document. And if you can't prove it, it didn't happen. And to say, oh, I don't want to say this, or it was a call and it was an email, I've done this for 3 years, and I document everything. You have to. And we got an email. I don't know if you guys had seen it yet or not. I answer all the emails. You know that. We also had conversations at both the Let's Talk Schools events. The constituent who asked us to answer a question publicly is my constituent, so I'm going to answer those for her directly here. Said she wanted to know, number 1, the exact number of Williamson County public school parents with children currently attending our public schools who feel their children or their child is being indoctrinated by attending social studies class. The answer is 0. And at least to me, and then all the emails that I've been copied on that are to the board, 0, not 1. Number 2, the exact number of Williamson County parents who do not have children currently in our school system that disagree with our social studies curriculum. We have Williamson County, by definition, or what she says in an email that came today, who disagrees. We got that 1 email today, so 1. And then the third one was the number of parents reporting that their child has changed religions as a result of attending 7th grade social. That answer is 0. The textbooks, when we say, oh, we want to protect our teachers, and we under the guise of protecting teachers and trusting teachers, to say that we don't trust you to look at the textbooks and that we're going to look at textbooks, that's horrible. That's just saying we're going to do your job for you, and we're not the subject matter experts in this. You said it yourself that you're not a subject matter expert in this, but you want to see the textbooks and you want to approve the textbooks. And when you went through the whole thing of the pages versus standards and the quantities of this and quantities of that, 100 pounds of bowling balls looks a lot different from 100 pounds of feathers. They both weigh 100 pounds, but there's a lot more of one than the other. And so when you look at quantity versus quality and depth and all of that, you can't just go by pages and standards and all of that things and just try and measure it up and put a ruler to it. And my last thing to this, until we end up to another part of the conversation, we have a shortage of bus drivers. We have a problem with substitute teachers. We have things that are affecting our kids right now, and we're fooling around with this. It is not a problem in Williamson County schools. We have no issues. No one has come forward and said, my kid is being indoctrinated. My kid took a trip to a mosque. I know that you hear about it on the news and everything else, and it happens in Florida and Texas and Indiana, wherever. You know what? For anybody that's on this side, go home, pack up. It's a passion. I'm happy that you're passionate about the issue, but go home and pack up and move to where the problem is. Fight it there. Because I'm very sure we could crowdsource your moving fees and your moving costs and get you there quickly. It's not happening here. Go to where the problem is and fight the problem. I value, and I'm not saying this I'm not just throwing this out there. I value the fact that people are passionate. I value that it's a concern to you. It's not a concern in Williamson County. It might be to 10 people and 10 more people who don't live in our county, but that's it. It's not a concern here. So pack up and go to where the problem is and fight it. Fight it, and I'll support you. I'll say go. But let us do our job. Let us get some bus drivers. Let us get some substitute teachers. Let us do what we need to do here.
We've been working on bus drivers. We've been working on all these issues. This is and could be a national, not
Williamson County.
So what? So what? Do we want to sit back?
So what?
And not be heard? All I've heard for I don't know how long is what's best for the children. And you know what? We want to be the benchmark for the state of Tennessee. All this is a statement. This has nothing.
It's inciting a riot for an issue that doesn't exist.
This is not inciting anything.
Of course it is.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Guys, stop. Raise your hands to speak, please. The next one was Candy, and then Ann.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I disagree with some of the things that you said, and we can certainly talk about them, but at this point, I think the overriding thing for me, and I'm trying to find a way that will encapsulate it without being received poorly, is that one of our code of ethics as a board member, and you bring it up all the time, Gary, is that I will at all times think in terms of children first, always determining as a board member, as a group of board members, other important things according to how they affect education and the training of our children. And so I think that diffuses that argument pretty well, because this issue is, whether we have embraced it or whether we feel that it's here, to stick our heads in the sand and pretend like it's not happening here, or even if it's not, but it's happening everywhere else and it's okay, we can ignore it, is just not appropriate. We have to think in terms of issues that are gonna come and affect our kids, issues that are presently affecting our kids, and things that we need to do to offset the dangers that these events force our kids to face, our teachers to face, our parents to face. I'd rather be proactive to an issue and know where we stand and how we feel about it than to be reactive to an issue because it's here and we didn't take time to deal with it. So I believe that one of our calls and one of our pledges when we took our oath is that we will think of children first. And the education in this county, regardless of whether it's here or now, but education across the United States, which is federally mandated and which always ends up trickling down to us at some level, Common Core being an example, we need to think of what this and how this might affect the children here in Williamson County and be able to have a response and to be prepared to have a response and a reaction or an action that needs to be taken as it is approaching. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play the new girl card a little bit here because this whole thing is baffling to me, honestly, because I, kind of threw my hat in the ring for this early in the summer, and for the past few months I've been talking to everyone under the sun. Parents across a lot of districts, just trying to understand the differences, teachers, principals, and understanding the issues that parents were concerned about and that might come up. And this literally never came up once. I had never had a single parent express that this was something they were concerned about in any regard. And I completely agree with you about being proactive, and I get that. And I think there's space for that in proportion to real issues that are affecting us now. And that's my concern because, as was mentioned earlier, there's been no emails to us until today and none of them were from a parent worrying about their children and the curriculum they're being exposed to. Didn't come up once from a parent at either Let's Talk Schools last week, and we were in the middle of the media blitz, so I was sure parents were going to come asking questions. I was at a middle school PTO meeting last week, didn't come up once, and a lot of other stuff came up, and those parents are as engaged as you can get at the middle school level, and not one of them brought it up, not once. I met with both principals in the middle schools in my district. Neither of them have heard from parents, and which makes me wonder if this is such an issue that we, who are representing the students and the parents, are supposed to be their representative voice, why this hasn't gone up to the teachers and the principals, and they don't know that this is an issue, yet certain board members clearly think this is the most important thing going on right now. And I would hope in the situation you quoted, which is strange, the fill in the blank thing, that was brought to the teacher, and I would love to know what the teacher's response was for that, and if that's something they should have been doing. Because if it's something they shouldn't have been doing, then that's an issue with the teacher and then the principal. So I'd love to know from that parent if it was addressed that way first before it made its way here.
It was. They met with the teacher, they met with the principal. Again, I didn't want to identify because I'm not about to say a teacher's name or even a school's name. But it was just, and I have it on my phone if you'd like to see. I have a picture that she sent me of her child's worksheet. She's a real person. This family's very concerned, and there are other families that are concerned who do not want to be mentioned because this is a volatile, un-PC kind of topic.
And I respect that, and I believe that to the bottom of my heart, that there are families that are worried about this, but we each represent thousands of families. And I don't believe this resolution is in the spirit of the thousands of parents in our district, and I think it's sending a message that we're not respecting them and who we're here to speak up for. And that's my concern with this, is I do not feel like this represents the county that I live in and that I'm raising my children in and sending them to public school. Thank you.
Rick?
And I have to say, I agree with you. And Newt Girl card aside, I've been on the board longer than you have, and I haven't received, well, when I first came on the board, I had one parent called constituent, and she asked me, she said, you know, I understand they're teaching Islam in school, so that's what people are saying. I said, well, I'm new to the board, but I know how to find out. So I talked, I think, with Jason and maybe Tim about it, and they kind of explained to me pretty much what Tim has gone over tonight, and I felt comfortable. I explained it to that parent, and she felt comfortable. And that's the last I've heard of it, other than in the news and through politicians. I did, however, speak to a rabbi friend of mine about this, and she said that she is far more concerned about the messages we send to the community and to the kids about the sensitivity for different religions and their observances than these concerns that we've heard expressed recently. In fact, she said that she thought it was a dangerous, slippery slope if we start trying to restrict the relationship between, the teaching of the relationship between religions, all religions, and history. And if this comes to a public forum, I'm quite confident that she'll stand up and say these things for herself. I think at the very least we've got a controversial resolution here, and I would suspect that it would take us hours and hours to come up with language that we could get comfortable with. So, and again, I question whether this is the right thing for us to be spending our time on. I don't think so.
Sue?
Actually, I beg to differ, and the reason being is that right now we have state standards and we also have a state test, and a lot of the things that are included on that state test are not necessarily positioned in a historical context. When children are asked to identify a prayer position, the proper prayer position, or write a paragraph about the Quran and the Sunnah and the daily impact on the lives of Muslims, that's in present tense, that is not historical. Some of the exercises that we have seen in other counties with the 5 pillars have also been replicated here in Williamson County. Now, if we sent home some type of assignment or ask kids to do some like flip paper chart thing on the 10 Commandments, or write a paragraph about the 10 Commandments and how they impact the daily lives of Christians, we would definitely hear about it. And what I do like about this resolution is that it starts to address some of these things that right now are taking away local control. So when you have state-issued standards, when you have these canned next generation standards that states have, and when you have these tests that everybody's required to take, and teachers, of course, given that they're high-stakes testing, they're going to be teaching to those tests. They're going to teach what's on that test. And when there's a number of questions about Islam that have nothing to do from a historical context, but everything to do with present context, they're going to have to teach it, right? And that's, I think we're putting our I think the state, with the way things have been done so far, they put our teachers in some very precarious spots. And I do like that this resolution at least frames up that one religion not be positioned in a almost treated with kid gloves and a certain image painted of it, simply out of political correctness and fear. I don't think that that's doing. And those conquests that people were talking about, you know, they talk about, oh yes, Christians and Jews were allowed to practice their religions. They weren't. It's convert or die, or pay, you know, a tax. So there's a lot of things too that some of the information that has been conveyed to students is not exactly correct, be it presented in a present day context or historical. And I do think that this is a good start. So thank you for taking the initiative on this, Beth.
Anyone else?
I just want to remind all of us that we each represent one of 12 in this county. And there are thousands of people in every district that we have. And that I would caution all of us, because I know we get pretty excited and heated, that we, you know, I can't speak to anything in anybody else's district but my own. And to say that, I know I was with Rick at one of the Let's Talk schools, and it did come up.
I was too.
So it may not have come up in your room. Just concerned about it.
Because of the media.
And so that being said, I think it's a dangerous trail to walk when you know, we can speak to what we know, but we need to really be careful that we don't include the whole board in some of our statements, because if I say it, I need to own it, and I need to know that I can stand behind it and I can be truthful about it. And when we make general statements that include all of us, it gets kind of dangerous, because there's a lot of people on this board I don't talk to on a daily basis or even a weekly basis. And I wouldn't begin to presume that I know what's best for your district or your district or your district.
Beth and then Jay.
I just wanted to say that I recognize we are not all going to see this issue the same. I knew when I wrote the resolution, and if you cannot support the resolution, I respect that, and it is your prerogative. I did knock on about 1,000 doors, and people are concerned about the integrity of textbooks in my district. And so I felt that I needed to show them that I am representing what their concerns are in this issue, and that was one of the driving forces of why I did it. So this is not like the Common Core resolution that I knew we were going to sit down and wordsmith and I'll get to a warm fuzzy place with, because I know we feel differently, and that's okay. There needs to be diversity on a board, but I feel strongly about it, and I need my constituents to know on record that I'm standing up for what I believe they care about.
Jay?
So, I guess I'm looking at this, and you laid out the four kind of goals of this, but I'm struggling to understand kind of what it does exactly. I mean, it makes a statement that that kind of defines further what I guess something that is under our authority, and it kind of defines how we are going to select textbooks when that's already something that we do. It just kind of tries to narrow that focus a little bit, or provide some guidance there. It says that we won't discipline teachers, and something that nobody's saying that we did. So it's providing guidance for something that we don't think exists today, maybe to prevent it from the future.
That's law. I put that in there because that's common.
Okay, so we're already doing it, and I don't know if it's in other policy or not, but I mean I'm sure it's somewhere if we're following the law, and and then we, as far as the, including on our website, state standards, are we already doing that?
Yes.
Okay, so we're already doing that. And then talking about how the assessments should be reviewed by teachers, parents, like, so I don't know, is that something that we're asking the legislators to change that? Or is that
Section change.
the last one, the
Resolved or the bullet point?
the resolve? So statewide assessment and of course exams should be reviewed by teachers, parents, and taxpayers prior to administration. So
That's a request. That's not happening right now.
so it's a request of the state to change their process. So we basically have three things that we're already doing, and one thing that we're asking the state to do is to just review these prior. I mean, it's a lot of stuff to do that. Like I'm like you said, you're not sure if people are going to wordsmith and figure out I mean when we got to when we did the Common Core resolution that ultimately ended in local control, we basically came down to kind of the least common denominator that we could all agree on. If you put that Common Core resolution on top of this and said we want local control to determine that, I mean, it almost does. I mean, I get outside of these three things that kind of name the things that we're not violating at this point. It kind of does it, and it just does it. I mean, it seems like that the purpose is kind of to name the problem and whether and we're naming a problem that we think exists nationally, but not necessarily at our district level. And it exists at our district level to the extent that it's been pushed down from somewhere else, right? So I guess I'm struggling with what the goal is. I get that people that you're making a statement and people wanted you to do it. I'm struggling for me. Like nobody asked me to make that statement, and so what do I base in my decision to do this on, and what's the action item? What's the result of us doing this? And second, I just wanted to ask, like some of the wording, is there a resolution that's out there that you pulled some of this stuff from? Did you just come up with this all based on everything out there? But I don't know.
Yeah, I pulled it together, not from any other resolution that was existing, but from just different sources of what I thought was going on. And it took me quite some time, quite honestly. And I know I get wordy sometimes, but I'm very passionate about this issue as far as making sure that our textbooks reflect our American ideals and don't have any religious bias. And that's why it got a little bit wordy. But the purpose, if you want me to answer, this is going to be one of the main topics. I don't know about main topics, but it's going to be a hot topic. Sheila Butt's already put a bill out there in our legislature coming up in January. And I wanted them to know that we are aware of it, and that at the state level, we want to make sure there's no inequalities at the standards. I want them to review that. And also, I think a big issue, and Dr. Looney's talked about this too, he would love to see this, but we don't ever get to see the assessments. The state-driven assessments, and assessments, the tests, drive curriculum. And then the curriculum is provided by these large publishing companies that got on board with Common Core, and we're starting to see some content. I truly believe that some of this content is starting to come out because of the publishing companies getting aligned with Common Core. Both of those 6th and 7th grade books at the front say Common Core aligned. And I'm not getting into a big Common Core debate, that's not it. But part of what this is that the statewide assessments do drive curriculum. Teachers don't get to see them, parents don't get to see them, we don't get to see them. Why? That seems illogical. Why we cannot make sure that there's no bias in the questions being asked. So that's part of one of the resolved. and the others were to basically reassure parents and taxpayers who are asking the questions, hey, why don't you have it on your website? Well, so this provides what is on our website and what their rights are, and that they can request their child be removed from instruction without retaliation. I think it reassures parents who have concerns to know that they do have that out. And again, it was being proactive because it is a major issue. It is being raised here in the county. Thankfully, we have fabulous teachers who are doing an excellent job, and so we haven't had big issues, and I think that's wonderful. I think a lot of it is because we've got a lot of teachers who are very grounded, and so I don't want to get too, I believe it needed to be done because otherwise we're not addressing a major topic that's going on right now throughout the state. Today, White County School Board was sued for selecting textbooks that were inaccurate. So I think it's a relevant issue.
Right, Bobby was next. And folks, we've talked on this now about 45, 50 minutes. Let's try to wrap this up, Bobby. And then I saw Dan and Candy. Did you raise your hand again?
I'll pass.
To answer the question of why can't we see the test is because we would have all the answers. You don't give a doctor their boards ahead of time. You don't give a lawyer the bar. You don't give a CPA the test. You don't give people the test ahead of time so that they can study to the test to have the questions and the answers. That's why we don't have it. That's a hard fact of education. I will say that I'm sure, speaking for you, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that I can say this. I'm sure that your intent behind this was not as I take it, because I take the intent of the resolution and the actionable items as highly inflammatory to our diverse community, especially the diverse community of my district. And I just can't support it in any form or fashion. And if for some reason it passed the board, I would not sign it. And what I would say is when we said, this is going back to hard, cold facts of accountability for everybody that's here, everybody that's watching at home, and everybody that listens or looks at Twitter or Facebook or anything later. My charge to you is email this board. Email this board tonight. If you're too tired tonight, email this board tomorrow morning. Before it gets away from you and you think, oh, I'll do it, because that's what happens with voting. People say, oh, I'll vote, and then the day the voting comes up, oh, I need to get home, I got to feed the kid, and then you don't vote, and less than 2% of the voting population comes out to vote, and that's what happens. Tonight, do it while I'm talking right now. Email this board and tell us if you are concerned, if you're not concerned, if we need to be spending time on this, or if we don't need to be spending time on this. That way we can have accountability, we can have hard, cold facts as far as what, as Candy had said, all of the districts want. That's what I charge to you. Because so far, as I said earlier, 0. That's how many I got.
Dan, you get the last word.
I'd just like to say that, first and foremost, and I said it at the Let's Talk Schools, I don't believe any teacher or administrator in this district has ever had children do anything that they shouldn't be doing, okay? The second thing I want to mention is this is a statement. That's what this resolution is a statement. And it was done with a lot of passion and a lot of thought and a lot of investigation. I don't feel that because a board member brings something before this board that it should always go back to, why don't you do your job and get bus drivers? Or why don't you do your job and get more teachers? And so on, which we're already involved in, giving raises and everything else. Why does everything have to be under the attack? I don't think it's right. And that's where I'll leave it. But I just want to say to Dr. Gaddis, thank you for this layout. It's great. Thank you for doing your job like you do. all that's being said here is we need to extend this to our legislators and whatnot and make people aware, just make people aware.
Mr. Chairman, point of question. Is there gonna be any movement on this resolution?
That's my next question to the board. This is presented under an information section, which means it's not part of the board agenda for our next board meeting. To do that, we would need to add it to the agenda in some form or fashion. There's multiple ways to do that. I've talked with Dr. Looney, and he and I are perfectly willing to add it to the agenda if we want to vote our conscience up or down on this particular issue as it is. My question to the board is, are you okay with us adding this to the agenda this month, or it can be in November? My preference would be not to delay something like this of this magnitude if we're going to do it.
I agree.
I'd rather do it this month.
So I'm asking the board, do you want to vote your conscience on this particular resolution that's here? It has not been reviewed by council at all, right?
Correct.
Right? So we don't know if there's anything in there that would need to have it, and I would personally like to have council, if we're gonna do this, I'd like council to look at it somewhat, but are you all okay with us taking this to, putting it on the agenda for, remember our meeting is not this coming Monday, it's the following Monday because of the fall break. So ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to say that there's one part that I do like, in essence, in part, and that is I would love to see the state assessments that after they've been used. So in other words, we see the past year's state assessments to use for review and for help in our curriculum. And I think most teachers would love to have that, and I think Mr. Gaddis, you would love to
I have good news.
Yeah.
They're being released in November.
Well, there you go.
Well, you did good work.
Good job.
TCAP.
So that the rest of the
Old
resolution
TCAP, this last year.
But going forward, T and ready, like the
But not until after the fact.
right.
They
Okay,
will be
fine.
released.
That's great. That's great news. Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Gaddis. For the rest of the resolution, although I deeply respect you, Dr. Burgos, and I understand your intent, I personally had a hard time reading this. I think, Jay, you touched on the same problems I had. I was just kind of trying to get my head around what are we trying to ask for, what are we trying to say, because if I was a state legislator and I was reading this, I'd be like, what do you guys want? I'm not sure, and I'm not the most brilliant guy in the world, but I'd have a hard time understanding exactly what are we saying. So I'm the way it's written right now, I would not be supporting it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't support having this on the agenda, especially as written only, because I think it'll further, it's just gonna be another divisive item on our school board agenda.
I agree. I don't want to review it.
We don't seem to have a consensus to put this on the agenda.
You and Dr. Looney will have to make a decision as the executive committee on that.
Okay. I will speak with Dr. Looney then, based on our discussions tonight, and see where he stands on it. We had talked previously, but obviously he wasn't here for any of the discussion to hear where we are. His initial thought was he's fine with it, to vote it up or down, but I'd like to give him the opportunity, since he did not hear any of the discussion. I'm pretty sure you'll be talking with him about it. So, okay, we've been at this 2 hours. Would you like to take a break and come back? All right, let's take about a 10-minute break.
If you leave her back, I'm just telling you.
You want me to leave before we talk about sub rates? Did you?
So, can we come together and talk about it, or do you want to look at it yourself?
Sure. I've read it.
I don't think there's anything legally wrong, but you tell me.
Yeah, I haven't studied it. The quote, the codes are accurate. You know, I'm not inclined to alter.
I think it just matters if there's anything illegal about it, right? I mean, it's more of a statement than anything else, and I tried to make that distinction.
I will say that
I haven't heard from any parents, so then you said.
We're trying to delay the audio.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything.
No, I know, because she understands.
we're having an attorney party.
Correct. So we can finish this one.
Oh, she said she has.
Because she wants to do it. And she said,
Back, folks. Anybody know the score of the baseball game? Predators are 2-2 in the third.
Auburn's up.
Auburn.
Auburn's
That's a miracle. Oh, no. Sorry, what?
Hey, watch it.
Hey, our team's been awful, so. Georgia Tech, so bad.
Oh, that's right.
All right, well, let's get started back. The next thing on our agenda is on page 83, board norms. Board, they're there. We just review them each time. Anyone have any questions about the board norms? Any changes you'd like to see in that? Okay, the next thing on there is part of our norms. We have a board member handbook. And Anne has put together a social media guideline based on her expertise. I forwarded that to y'all. We're not asking for any votes on this month. This is part of, we want to see if you would like to put that in our handbook. And if you want to, we can either just add it, but in the past, we have voted on the handbook of adoption. So I would like to give Anne a chance to go over that with you and see if we are comfortable with putting this on the agenda for November to possibly add to our board member handbook. Handbook is a guide for board members. It's just to help us get through our responsibilities. So Anne, if you would go ahead.
Oh, yes, thank you. So I was trying to understand what I was supposed to be doing when I started, and then this came up at the last board meeting. And so for 3 years, actually I started the customer service department at Nissan for social media. So I got really excited about this and just started looking to see what other school districts did. And a lot of school districts of similar sizes across the country do have policies in place that either pertain to their employees or their school boards, and sometimes it's both, sometimes they're different. So this is kind of taking from best practices that a lot of the companies are now using on social media to interact with their customers, as that's now their primary channel of contact. So part of the thinking behind this is our constituents and our parents and consumers, if you will, this is kind of the flow that they've come to expect on these pages, on Facebook, on Twitter, no matter who they're talking to. And so kind of the level of expectation that when you ask someone a question or try to interact with someone on social media, kind of the norms that is now a part of our culture online, kind of meshed with what our expectations are as board members to interact with our communities. So this was just a first pass at it, just kind of based loosely on what I've done in a corporate environment, meshed with what I've seen other districts doing that I thought might be helpful, just as a reference for us, but also setting expectations with our constituents and our communities. Very open to feedback. I will not be, you can rip it apart, send edits. I know Gary is sending out, I think Mr. Squires, Mr. Golden all looked at it and gave their input, so I appreciate that very much. It's just a starting point for us.
Anyone want to comment? PJ?
Speaking as chairman, I like the first part, when you started when this proposed edition starts elaborating, under Facebook and Twitter, this starts getting into the weeds for me. The first part kind of sticks to the general theme that if you're going to use social media, just use it in accordance with our norms and ethics, code of ethics. And the bottom line is, do unto others as you have them do unto you. If you're just kind and courteous to people, then that's kind of what you want people to be to you as well. So I like that first part, but when it starts getting into the other, I think it's just too prescriptive. Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Rick?
On the Facebook policy, if I decide to run for re-election, I may put up a Facebook page for re-election. How would that be affected? Actually, I don't see anything in here that would cause a problem, I don't think. But obviously, I would be identifying myself as a school board member. So does this cover that Facebook page?
If I may, the intent was anytime you were representing yourself as a school board member or potential school board. Obviously, if they're not already on the board, we can't recommend what they do or don't do. And really, just know this was written halfway from the standpoint of someone coming into this role that isn't social media savvy and may not be familiar with social media etiquette. So while it is overly prescriptive for many, not everybody is as familiar with these channels. So, I think there's still room for interpretation on the election pages, but anytime you're representing yourself in public as a school board member, there's certain expectations on how you conduct yourselves.
Yeah, it seems like the expectations should be the same whether it's a candidate page or not, but as a candidate, I may be expressing opinions as a candidate, even if I'm on the board, that may not reflect the board, may be contrary to the board. Like I may say, I disagree with the board when the board did such and such, and really as a board member, I don't feel that would be an appropriate thing for me to do through social media at this particular point. But as a candidate, I may feel a little bit differently about that.
Mm-hmm. We can't legislate in any way, shape, or form people that aren't already on the board.
Well, but I am on the board. I'm talking about if I
I
decide
think
to
if
run
you
for
designate it as
re-election.
your own personal opinion and state that clearly so there's no confusion, then there's no confusion. This is my opinion as a citizen, not as a board member. But it's just, that's a gray area everywhere.
Mhm. Okay, otherwise it looks good to me.
Bobby?
Part of your question is answered in the Code of Ethics, as far as when we talked about whether you can advocate for another candidate or another elected official already, and we said, in fact, we had the discussion back in the winter, we said, no, you can only advocate for yourself on your
Right.
page, so you can do that. But, everyone here probably knows, and everybody's listening knows, I have Twitter, I have a school board Facebook page, and then I have a newsletter that goes out after every single meeting. And what I might do is if I were to vote against the will of the board, I might say, here's my opinion, here's the issue, here's my opinion. The vote was blah, 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 I voted against, the motion passes. And as we've all said before, the will of the board goes with the will of the board. I don't I wouldn't turn around and say, well, Rick said this, or what. I would just say, if whoever votes, on my newsletter, which goes to my Facebook page, it posts there automatically, it goes to Twitter as well, as I'll just put how the vote went, because that's public access anyway, so.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions?
I agree with Bobby. I think this is covered in the Code of Ethics and in our board norms. Pretty much all this. And it reads good.
Oh, sorry, Dan and I agree, but I also do like it as written, like with everything, with the stipulations for both the social media presences. I do like that.
I thought we were getting something.
We laid our first brick of the bridge.
Yes, I think this is covered between acceptable use and the board norms as well as the board code of ethics. So I don't feel this is really necessary, plus a lot of the pages, if you look at it, a lot of folks, if it's a candidate page, it ultimately then turns into your board member page if you were elected. Ultimately, people are going to do what they're going to do. We see that even in email communications amongst board members. So I would say that we need to be mindful that our job is not to be policing one another as much as it is to make sure that we are adopting policies and then making sure that those policies are put into practice. So I would be against any type of addition.
I have one final comment. I promise I'll stop playing the New World card soon. But a board handbook for me, I studied this thing inside and out when I was both trying to get the seat and then as a new member. And again, the intent behind this was to say, this is a super scary area for a lot of people. Especially if they're not familiar with social media. And that's why a lot of school districts have moved to this, to say, don't be afraid to go into social media. It is an important channel for communicating with people. Here's some help on the do's and don'ts of it. So it's not to police people, more so to say, these are best practices and how we'd recommend that you do so. There's obviously we can't do anything if someone's not doing this, right? It's just, It's a handbook, it's a tool.
We felt after seeing this, the most appropriate place to put it would be in a handbook, not as a policy or under the norm. Any other comments, Jay?
I mean, I don't disagree with anything in here, so, I mean, if it's helpful, I don't see why. Granted, it does define in more detail what the ethics and code, mores and everything, I mean, we don't have anything that tells us what we should do. There's still some gray area, but it does answer a lot of the questions that right now we have to ask Carol or somebody else, and there's no one place that's defined. So I actually don't mind the detail. I agree. I mean, the first part is just right on point, and then it goes and it is some detail, but I kind of like the detail for the handbook specifically. This isn't saying what the I mean, we don't have any penalties anyway, but this is just more for information's sake for a new board member or existing, so I'm okay with it.
Any other comments?
I like the part that you laid out specific guidelines of what if the board member is getting abused by the community?
Exactly.
You know, because I have seen that be the impetus sometimes for the lashback and, you know, who started what gets lost and everything, right? So I like the fact that it says use of obscene, threatening, or harassing behavior of any kind is not tolerated or permitted, and users can be banned from commenting if after a warning they repeatedly disregard that policy. So it protects kind of both sides. I like that part a lot. I'm kind of leaning with PJ though, that in the sense of the social media guidelines kind of covers that, but I like that part.
Anything else? All right, then we'll ask to put this, since I think we should probably have a vote on it, since we had voted last time we adopted our handbook. We probably need to put it on as a vote for November, not now. Okay? You good with that? All right, next item. I would like to skip to the Code of Ethics since this ties into it right now, if you're okay with that. Code of Ethics is on page 93. We did some slight adjustments last year. State requires it's every 2 years, right? Every 2 years. We look at ours every year as part of our policy. Is there any comments or questions or any one changes, additions, deletions to our Code of Ethics? Ms. Curlee.
I think when some of us attended the TSBA training, and I think there were probably like 4 or 5 of us there. There were a lot of good materials in the board superintendent relations packet, and I think a lot of our Code of Ethics really pertain to the board's relationship with fellow board members. And what I liked about TSBA is they even had one for the superintendent's relationship with the board. And it was just very straightforward stuff. I mean, but it was just more about treating board members, you know, certainly equally, allowing due process, implementation of written policies. I just felt it would be good because right now we're essentially asking Dr. Looney to sign on to a Code of Ethics, but there's not a lot in there with respect to his relationship with us.
The Code of Ethics was designed as the school board members and how school board members should react. And this came originally years ago from TSBA and SBA. TSBA has some additional materials. We'd love to be seeing what they're saying we should be doing in our Code of Ethics.
Yes. So, I mean, I've got, I just brought my training book along, but it was more ethical standards for superintendents. Essentially, they had a Code of Ethics that board members signed that's pretty consistent with ours, but then there was also one for the superintendent, and it pertained to really his relationship with the board and implementation of policies, and that sort of thing. And because Dr. Looney's not here, we don't know how in-depth we want to get into this, but I mean, I'll be happy to make copies or see if it's possible to get this scanned in.
Is it a separate one for the, is it like This is the
It's
school
just a
board
one
code, is
page.
that the superintendent's code? Is that, okay, so
It's just
a
a one
separate-
pager.
It's a separate entity,
Mhm.
but could be dovetailed in it.
Yes.
I'd love to see it. What about the rest of you? Let's see it, and then definitely don't want to put it on anything for November. We want to give, for October, we want Dr. Looney to see it. But how about we put it on for discussion at the November work session?
Okay.
So we can get copies of that, since that's part of the TSBA training, I think that's appropriate.
Right, and so, just as we're joining TSBA, I think they do have a lot of really good tools, and especially in the board superintendent relationship training, there were just a number of really good pieces in there that I think would be beneficial for the board.
Okay, great, thank you. Anything on our code then that we're dealing with now? Is everyone okay with our code as it stands? As you remember, we go around the room and each one reads a passage, and then we sign it at the meeting, so everyone recognizes that the board does have a code of ethics. We had it before it was required.
Because we're Williamson County.
All right. Thank you for letting me skip to that one. The next item on there is the, under tab 3, board policies first reading, 4.503, parent organization booster club. Mr. Squires.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This policy change reflects an issue that has arisen with some of our PTOs. As a little bit of background, there's an act called the School Support Organization Financial Accountability Act, which is perhaps the worst title ever for an act, but it abbreviates amusingly to SOFA. It describes all of the it describes all of the sort of nuts and bolts of how PTOs work. It provides an accountability framework, that sort of thing. One of the things it does is limits on a PTO who can serve as the treasurer or who can have control over the checkbook in that organization. For whatever reason in the past, this board went beyond what is required by law. In other words, we restricted it more. So what you see here is the change at line 26 to line 31. That's what's actually in the statute. That's what the legislature put in place as the sort of protection measure. The board in the past, this board in the past, expanded that scope beyond those sort of discrete named individuals who cannot control the checkbook or funds for a PTO, went beyond that and just said all Williamson County Schools employees cannot be one of those persons, a treasurer or a person who signs the checks. Some of our PTOs are having a problem with that. It's creating a bit of an issue because a lot of our parents are on the sub list. In other words, they sign up to be substitute teachers. And if you remember, we've had some trouble in the past having enough subs for all of our schools, and we sort of did this drive to get more subs. Lots of the parents who donate their time to the schools work both on the PTO and as subs. That makes them a Williamson County Schools employee, and it prohibits them then, because of that, from serving in that role for their PTO. After some looking into this, and I think we had some discussions with the comptroller also, where they interpreted some of this stuff for us as well from their perspective. The recommendation here is to take it back to the restrictions that are in the statute as the legislature described, rather than the overbroad descriptions that are in the current policy, on the theory that it provides parents more opportunity to engage. The issues that you'll see are things like a parent who has a student at one school but is a volunteer or a sub at another school, right? They're then prohibited from their own child's PTO certain roles under the Act, and it removes some of that. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. That was probably more than my time was allotted.
Anyone have any questions? No, Bill, you've been really on point tonight.
That's a quick question. Who's responsible for background checks for treasurers, or do they have to go through some type of background check?
Technically, there is not a requirement for that, and I will say, because these are the same groups of folks, these involved parents, right? So they're often volunteers, they're often subs. So they've gone through a background check, a lot of them, as one of the other processes they go through. But our PTOs are sort of separate organizations, and they're not required, as far as I know, to have background checks. Jason, do you disagree with that?
It's possible that various PTOs might require that of their membership. We have a tier 3 fingerprint requirement that parallels our requirement for employees and contractors, that if you're going to come into contact with children, you must be fingerprinted. But we have not governed the PTOs in that way. That would be subject to their bylaws or their own internal rules.
And it does appear, from what I'm seeing, that the PTOs are becoming more sensitive to that. As an example, I looked at PTO bylaws from one of the Nolensville schools that we're building, and they've incorporated that into theirs, that they have to go through a background check. Anyone who's going to touch the checkbook. But by law, it's not required.
I will tell you also that the fingerprint check that we do is restricted to government entities. We can't share with anybody outside the school system a particular offense that we found, and so there's limits. We can't share those details with PTOs. However, PTOs could say you must be a Tier 3 volunteer to be on our executive board or something like that. They do have the power to create those rules for themselves.
Could we actually say, I know we had a good discussion on this at the policy meeting, but could we actually say, change the definition or enhance the definition of Tier 3 to include executive board of PTOs?
We can't force that of PTOs. We can recommend that.
So that would have to be a bylaw that so
yes. Now we always have, the proverbial nuclear option to say,
we
you
don't
can't.
Recognize, I don't want to not recognize it. But, just trying to figure out recognizing how the most recent incident happened is because you couldn't. If they didn't get Tier 3 access, we can't communicate that to them because they're not a governmental entity. But if they were required, so maybe it's a recommendation on our part that at least their treasurer president must get Tier 3 access, because then if we couldn't grant that, then they would say, well, you don't have to tell them why, they just didn't get it. So we don't have to communicate anything to them, but they tried to get Tier 3 access and they didn't. So maybe that's a recommendation that we take back to the PTO Leadership Council.
I think that's a good idea. I think that's worth.
Because they want to do. I mean, they want to protect themselves too. I mean, they're not trying to restrict access. And so.
President and treasurer.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions on this one? Okay, let's move on to the next item, tenure recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It may seem strange to you to have tenure recommendations in October, but the reason for that is because part of tenure, since this law was changed on ballparking 3 years ago, is that tenure can't be granted until the student results from testing have come through. We now have the testing results, and based on that, the individuals on your list here on page 87 and 88 and 89 are individuals who do qualify for tenure under Tennessee law. So we recommend your approval.
Okay, those are the names that will be presented to us to vote on, and it's one of the board's responsibilities to approve tenure. And the laws, I think, recommend that has to be recommended from the director and then the board.
That's correct. And if someone does not get tenure, then we cannot continue them in employment. That's still, as I understand it, that's still. Oh, well, that's a good point.
No, not
yeah.
anymore.
Well, there's actually a variation on that. If somebody qualifies, then they get it, or they don't. If somebody's in that range in the middle, then they can continue in employment. And so these individuals here have qualified and are recommended for tenure.
Just because I've never seen it, can you explain to me the basis under which I, as a board member, or we as a board, would not grant tenure to an individual? I don't even. Yeah. Is it just a? I mean, I don't even understand.
I may invite Ms. Owens to comment too. I can give you my perspective as a lawyer. A lot of these laws have a historical basis. That years and years ago, tenure was passed, if I'm not mistaken, in 1952 originally. At the time, there was a lot of board members' control of hiring and terminating of employment. Often it was, what political party are you in? And if you're not in my political party and I just won election, you're out of here. And so tenure, this was during the Depression, World War II era, that kind of thing was going on. So tenure was initiated there, And it was a step back from that, and board members were still the decision makers. And so it's a nod to a recognition that board members have a feel for the community and know whether teachers are appropriate for the commitment that you're going to be here as long as you want to be, as long as you're doing your job. I will say, as a practical matter, the larger and larger the district gets, the less and less that may be true. Williamson County, I can't guess. I can guess. That's what I was about to do. Williamson County's population in 1952 was significantly lower, and so it made it more sense.
Hey, we started out with a single-room school back in 1900.
So Rebecca Owens may be able to give some other detail. That's just my perspective.
The only thing I would say is that the principals and our office work very hard with those people that shouldn't be getting tenure because there are issues with their performance. We work with those individuals to make sure that they don't continue their employment. And so those decisions are usually made before they get to this point.
With that being said, if you all have a concern for anybody, our suggestion would be schedule a time or stop by the Human Resources Department and look through their file, look through their evaluations. Board members have from time to time done that when they've had an individual experience that that triggered a concern they wanted to look at.
Hey, Jason, their evaluations are not in their file anymore because they're all electronic.
Oh, good point, electronic. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, Rebecca, now that you've had the stage here, you can go ahead and continue with the next item, the classified hiring rates on page 91.
As you know, we've talked about trying to change our classified pay hiring chart. There are a lot of issues with it. It's going to be one of those things that we're just going to have to take little bits and pieces about. So there are two that are here for you that are very critical: our IT positions as well as the subs. If you look at the information, obviously it's very important that we have IT individuals that know what they're doing and pay them for that experience. We do lose people. And we also have a hard time. We've got two positions that have been open for a very long time. So it's very critical that we do this for IT to maintain the individuals that we have. The other is the subs. The sub issues come up a couple of times today. We reviewed information. It's been at least 10 years since the sub rates have changed. We have done some things in the past, which is to increase the pay if they've been consistently subbing, but the overall rates have not changed, and so we're asking that we change all those at least by $5, which is what the chart there shows you. We do get complaints all the time that the sub rate has not changed in a long time. Can you please do something about it? So,
PJ.
Is it possible that even this increase will not be enough to fill all the positions? Is that at least, in the back of your head, a thought?
It can be. It just depends. As an example, today we had around 85% that were filled. Some of that, a lot of the unfilled positions tend to be special ed teachers' assistants, and that is just a very hard position because they do a lot of different things with our special ed population. So, but yes, it may be that we need to do some additional, especially for the special ed assistants. But again, this is a start to try to assist with that. But it is $5 on all of those different tiers. So we're hoping that would at least help us. Obviously, we do have some budget constraints as far as that goes as well, as Leslie likes to remind us, and so we hope that this will be a very positive move.
And I don't mean to question your expertise, or I know we do have budget constraints. However, I mean, just working in the marketplace, and I have to hire people, and I know that it is almost impossible to find qualified people. You have to pay through the nose to get them, and that's just a fact. You know, you can't change that. That's a market value of expertise. And I just don't think it's enough, to be honest with you. I think it's, and then, sorry, Leslie. But it's the truth. I really don't think that it's enough to really to recruit, you know, highly qualified people for the positions of substitute teachers. And we can certainly try this, but I think, you know, we meet once a month, you know, and so every time we do this, it prolongs something. I'd rather do something that's a little more aggressive and let's solve the problem. I think Mr. Hullett brought that up earlier, you know, that this is one of the problems that we really need to solve and need to get our arms around. I really don't like doing half measures or you know, trying to do something and yet being too conservative so that we don't ever accomplish the goal. So that's my concern, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr.
Let's see, I had Rick want to speak next, and Leslie. Leslie, do you want to address?
Let me just interject something before you do. Her recommendation is 5. It's still gonna break the budget, and I'm gonna come for a budget amendment near the end of the year. I just don't know yet. I just don't know if this will improve it so that possibly we won't, but I doubt it. But that's her recommendation. If you feel like we should do more, this is when you should discuss and say, I'd prefer you to do 7 or 10 or something like that. Again, it's gonna bust the budget, but this may also too. So, especially without, you know, last year was an ice year where we had a lot of snow days. Well, this may be a flu year where we have a whole lot of people sick that's that's unnormal. So, I'm going to have to go for a budget amendment anyway. So, for this adjustment, I'm not gonna do it now because I just wanna see the impact and be able to project a little bit further out before I go to get it. So this would be the time that if you all feel that $5 isn't sufficient, then you should offer another thing for us to consider and then pass that.
Leslie, what if we don't have you said 80, we're filling 85% of the available subs.
Well, today was 80. We run usually between 80 and 90% every day.
Okay, so what happens to that 10 to 20% that don't get filled?
They're absorbed in other classrooms. The kids, I mean, you literally have to take that class and divide it between other classrooms.
So we've got in the budget to pay 100% of the subs, right? We've got a number of subs.
That number is unknown every year.
But you just estimate what it is based on historical.
On history. Yeah, history. And really, if you watch it,
and the history is based on a less than 100% fill rate too. So.
Right, and you never know from year to year what you're taking the sub days for. It could be for illness, it could be for admin leave. We try to do things internally like, no, let's don't do admin leave during the day, try to do some of those things afterwards. One step we did do is we just developed an SOP to pay teachers for their for at least 2 to cover these, to pay them. That would encourage some of them giving up their planning time. If we pay them during the day to do it, then they can do their planning time after the day for their salary. So that's another way we're trying to cover some of these, but only in the middle and the high.
But just like bus drivers, doubling up is not ideal.
Yeah, right. It's not an ideal situation, but it's also, we're already recognizing the fact that they're doing that. So they're giving up their planning period to be up. The only time they can do it is during their planning period or their whatever other period. But and we only feel like we can do that in the middle and the high. So that is one step we've also taken for the substitutes. And again, and that's another thing that will come out of the substitute budget. So
Denise, you wanted to comment about that particular issue?
Yes, that would be great. Ms. McGraw and I were sitting in Let's Talk Schools, and this topic came to the table. Oh, and Rick was there. I am so sorry. Rick was with us. I'm so sorry. But I can only speak from the elementary level, and whether or not a building that has all the subs that's needed, every administrator has become uniquely gifted in figuring it out. As you heard the one principal in the room say, we look to hire some teacher assistants a lot of times that hold a license. They're like gold in a building. So when a teacher's out, they can actually go in and cover class. Outside of that, they start pulling TAs. Usually just you're pulling and trying to cover the best you can. Mrs. Emerson just mentioned something that's also done, and that's taking a class, dispersing it out to the other grade level, the same grade level teachers, so that the other teachers pick up the load for the teacher that's absent. What we have to guard against, and the problem being, is the large size in 4th and 5th. That's usually not typically done because we already have anywhere from 27 to 30 kids in a class, max size being 30. But in the primary grades, it's much easier. But it does stretch all resources in a building when you have to go after your subs that way. So we know we've got a problem, we know we've got a shortage from time to time, but there's not a day that goes by that we don't have some buildings looking to cover 1 to 2 subs every day.
So, one of to expand on that discussion a little bit, one of the ideas that was kind of tossed about in the room was for us to look at possibly hiring permanent subs for each school, where maybe there are 2 people who are assigned to a school, or it could be a group of schools, who are full-time employees, get benefits, and we know that they are going to be substituting. So that could perhaps be a possible solution. I did mention that to Dr. Looney, but I would just like to socialize this idea, which was not my idea, but it came from, I think, someone from Allendale in the class. The other thing is, Leslie, you're gonna hate this.
I retire.
But when you say we're gonna break the bank or bust the budget, what's the magnitude? Are we talking 10,000, 100,000, 200,000, $500,000, $2 million?
Until you all make your decision, I can't tell you that.
Okay, $7.
Okay, well then let me go back to my office. For you. It'll be in the 100,000.
Okay, so, I would propose that we ask Leslie and Rebecca and whomever is involved to look at changing that number from $5 a day to at least $7 a day. Does that make sense to you, PJ?
And thank you for asking, because I still think 7's too low.
Well, whatever the number is, pick a number. Or say, look at 7, look at 12.
I'll just be honest with this board. I'm tired of hearing about it. I really am. I'm tired of hearing about it.
Give us a number.
Well, I'll give you a number.
Yeah.
Full time for somebody so at $85 per day, full time. If they just permanent sub on this pay scale, they're making $15,000 a year.
So
That's based
we
on
need to at
100.
least double it.
As a percentage
salary.
as a percentage of a first year teacher, right? Because that's somebody who has an active Tennessee certification. We're paying what's the first year rate for a 36. So we're paying them less than half.
Is that based on how many days?
It's based on 100. Well, I did based on 177.
177. Yes.
If you hired full time, they're 200.
Well, and granted, they can't work that many hours because we won't allow them to go that much because they get benefits, right? But still, who here would go? My 13-year-old barely goes. She didn't want to go. Gets a great job reffing soccer games on the weekends, and they make $11 an hour. Like, that's $11 an hour. Like, really? Like I just think so. I agree with PJ. It's not worth it. So the ones that are doing it aren't doing it for the money. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Let's be sure about that. But
Candy, you want to speak?
I do. I think that's a great idea.
Which one?
I think, yes,
Which one?
to
Double it?
discuss and to probe and really kind of develop an idea. Yes.
So what do we need to do? Can we leave it in your hands to?
That would be HR and Ms. Holman.
Well, and if I may address that a little bit more broadly, given this discussion, I think it's good that we've got another week before the board meeting, because one of the issues that we deal with here is every classified pay. And there's a relationship between every person's job and their pay and the next person's job and their pay. The reality is, and we've had this reality for years, the classified pay chart is a real struggle, in part because it's not a classified pay chart. It's a classified hire chart. And it starts the hire time, and we have levels 0 through 4, and this is broader than just substitute teachers. And when somebody hires on at level 0, because of the way our raise structure is, they never move to level 1, level 2, level 3. It's not a pay chart, it's a hire chart. You get hired at a certain point, and then you get your 2% raise, or we got a 5% raise, which was tremendous compared to our history this past year. You never move to the next level in that chart. So in the substitute example, what they're working on is trying to find that point on the basic economic chart of where does supply meet demand. And the reality is, to some degree, we're shooting in the dark no matter what number we pick, right? You're hoping that you hit it. And so what Leslie's been working on is, within the pie that we have, within the budget that we've already set, how much can we creep towards that so that when we're making budget decisions for the coming year, we can make a more informed decision. And one thing that Jeff Fuller talked about in the context of bus drivers is, when he's come, it's going to get worse before it gets better, because you're also talking about quality of the work, and so there are a lot of variables. So we will go back and look at what we could reasonably do for subs, but just know that long term, HR is working on every one of those classified pay slots, because it is such a struggle for those lower paying jobs, because our economy is doing well here.
We had Ann, and then Rick. Did you want to say?
I'll be really quick. I just was tag teaming on the suggestion from the Allendale teacher that I bounced off of two principals in terms of having kind of permanently assigned substitutes. And I don't understand anything about the logistics of this, but they both really liked the idea. And they are definitely not being paid enough, but what I'm hearing is the challenges is more the last minute scheduling for people, that they just can't pick up shifts last minute. And so having that rotation and saying, I know every Tuesday I'm a sub, no matter what. That there's a rare chance that you'll show up and they'll be like, we don't need you. Yeah. And so I think if we can get creative about pay, raise, and a combination of alleviating that as a pain point would be a great discussion.
I agree with that. There's some other variables besides simply pay. There's
Rick.
Okay, so it sounds like the board is interested in addressing this a little bit differently than you have proposed. So the question to you would be, okay, what kind of hardship would that cause you if we delay a decision on this, even though that decision may be that there's no money? Do you feel like you need the $5 immediately?
I mean, obviously, any amount of money is going to help us immediately to assist, pulling the individuals in. But there are additional issues with doing two subs. You have the whole benefits issue. Are we going to pay the benefits for them? So that's an additional cost. And subs do not get benefits, so that would have to be something that would be factored in. Because if we do have permanent subs, then we're going to have to offer those individuals benefits.
So I guess, I have a total confidence that you folks can figure that out and bring it back to us. The question is, do we need to approve the 5 immediately? Because obviously an alternative proposal and the impact of it won't come back in October.
What I would suggest is let us answer that question before the Monday board meeting that's actually 10 days away. Okay. I think that's a really good question. My gut feeling is we're probably going to say let's at least take a baby step now, but we'll give you a good definitive answer after we talk with Dr. Mooney.
Okay, thank you.
What about itinerant teachers? I mean, like if a sub cannot be a full-time, an itinerant teacher that is full-time would qualify for maybe benefits under a different category. I don't know what you call it, but
Yeah.
I mean.
Well, Leslie can answer the budget issue about, we have a certain number of FTEs, full-time equivalents that have been budgeted with benefits already, Leslie?
Right, and like when you have an interim teacher, they do get the benefits, but only after the person's used their sick leave and have run out of sick leave do they kick in with the interim rate and the benefits. So you always have the one FTE getting the benefits. You don't ever have the interim and the FTE get it. It's only after the FTE has run out of their benefits and then the other ones goes in.
What was the fill rate on substitutes last year, average, do you know, off the top of your head?
It stays between 80 and 90%.
Last year as well?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Rebecca, you're on probation because you went way over your time.
I'm sorry. It is a very important issue.
Yeah.
Now you're even farther over.
This is one of those, and I want to reiterate myself, but I really would, Mr. Gold, like for you to propose to the board a solution that you know will work. Because I really don't like this, you know, we hope it will, and oh, we're trying to be really conservative, because I really am tired of hearing about it, and I'm, you know, I don't want to criticize, you know, the administration at all. However, this conservative effort to just, you know, oh, let's try this and let's hope the best, and it's not working, and we've been on this too long, in my opinion. My parents are sick of it. I'm sick of it as a parent. I really want to have 100% fill rate. I think anything less than 100% is unacceptable. So, again, that's my recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Well, you got your marching orders on that.
Well, we're talking a major budget issue.
Yes, we are.
And so I appreciate the instruction.
Okay, Leslie's feeling really not happy right this moment, but she's gonna give us a budget update.
These are some tiny budget adjustments that
What do you mean,
fund
tiny?
themselves, $14,000. The first one is allocating some money that we received last year, that's in last year's fund balance, from the Fine Arts Festival, and it's to the designated use of those contributions in excess of the expenses last year would be used towards the honor choir this year to start one. So this is just to get the money in the budget to do that.
Any questions for that one?
Wait a minute, you need to change that word from equipment to contracted services.
Where?
Is that the right account number? I mean, come
That's the
on.
right account number, that's why
You
I'm
know
changing,
that.
that's why I'm changing it to contracted services.
I love that. I love that you know that.
The second one, it's a grant that the Central Cafeteria Fund has gotten, and they're gonna use it for equipment.
Questions on that? Lester, you're getting a gold star for this.
Okay, everybody hold your breath. Here we're starting in with the big ones. We do this every time we start up schools. It's been a long time since we've started up 3 schools in a year. Don't think we've ever started up 3 schools in 1 year. So this is giving them the startup costs for the athletics, band, new CTE programs and stuff beyond what the bond money pays for. We always give this to the principal. It's designed towards their programs and things like that. So there's $781,000 for the high school, $300,000 and $600 up to the middle school, and $222,200 to Mill Creek.
Do you have a schedule of what's to come? What's because we've got some more resolution. I mean, I think you had described to us that we were going to have some resolutions on through the year.
I'll be bringing probably a resolution in January of next year, which is next year, for the teachers that we've had. We already we had to hire 6 more teachers than we had in the budget, but we had to hire them to meet our standards and stuff. So because we're growing at sort of a fast rate per month, which is a little more, it's more aggressive this year than it has been in a long time. I'm trying to hold off on, I don't want to piecemeal and go, I need 5 now, I need 4 now. So I'm hoping by January, because we'll have a big influx then too, because that always happens, of students. So I might need additional teachers in January, and I will probably be bringing forth a resolution in January for teachers. And it'll probably be to the tune of about 10 to 12 more teachers. We are in desperate need of more special education assistants, to the tune of about 30 right now, about 30. We've already placed a lot of them because they have to be, because of their IEPs. Again, I didn't want to come, at this time, because I feel like that's going to continue a little bit, and we want to see if 30 is going to be sufficient. I think we've already placed, 20 some of them, and had built in a few more for the daily enters of people that have an IEP that requires a one-on-one. So that's one to come. We'll be funding our buses in January like we normally do. That'll be in the millions. These 2 resolutions, the startup, which is totally coming from fund balance, and the special ed, we started these, we told you about this in August. As soon as August started, we realized that we needed 2 more early childhood classrooms. We went ahead and hired those. I'm coming for those. Part of that was funded by that excess cost money that we get back from the state, but $162,000 came from fund balance. Those 2 resolutions right now, these are our first resolutions that'll go to the commission this year. That takes us down into our 3%. I haven't given my current budget report.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Well, then you would.
We haven't left yet.
Okay. Well, the current budget report, I would have been saying that right now the revenues are coming in pretty strong for sales tax again. I budgeted a 6% increase, and right now we're at 9 and 10% for the last 3 months, which is a very strong thing. So, and I also looked at privilege tax, which isn't our money. But the adequate schools and the older school privilege tax, they are really doing well this year. They're $1 million head in one, so that means the county is doing well with those next year too. So right now revenues are coming in pretty well. So I feel like we'll have the money to make these adjustments by the year end. Gasoline, however. In last month alone, we were $90,000 less than what we spent in gasoline last year, and that's with additional routes. So to me, we're saving some money in some other areas and stuff like that. We had a harsh winter, so our utilities last year were a little bit higher. Maybe we won't have that this year, and again, my utilities we might have a savings there, but. We just use the budget where we can find the money and, move it around and put it where we can. So, but I am, it is a huge year for needed personnel. We've just really held back on support personnel for so long that it's just, we're busting at to get everything done that needs to be done, we're going to have to come for some resolution for that.
I could just give one example of that, because I saw some of you look at that number of needing 30 additional special ed TAs. But just to give you an idea, Carol has left now, but I had her look at just the 30 days of September and how many new students did we have come to our district who had IEPs with disabilities. And that number was 32. Well, that's not so huge, but of the 32, 24 of those students were classified as high needs, which means they have to have one-to-one assistance at least half a day every day.
And one other thing, we just have put into the paper to hire 2 ESL, and he's got data on that, 70 extra people.
Our ESL population, our general population is up about, it's 3% or a little more this year. Our ESL population is up 11%.
So of those teachers that we've already gone into, we've got 2 more ESL. That gets us already at 10. So that's why I want to hold off till January, and it'll probably be about a 15 to 20 requests for teachers, 30 at least for SPED assistants. So
What would be helpful, really helpful for me is like somewhere in your monthly report, kind of a running total of all of the teachers and kind of the budgetary impact of things that we're, and probably the commission would probably appreciate it. Say, hey, we're going to come to you once at the end, once we need the funds, but this is an ongoing budget overage that we know it might be offset by some other things that are short, so we're not asking for it yet, but just to.
Well, usually I come when I see the need. This time I saw it was coming so strong, I thought, and because of the growth from month to month, I felt like I needed to hold back. I needed to stay. Usually I do bring it in a timely manner, but I don't want to keep coming. I don't want to keep coming, and so I've usually come in September or October with my teacher request, but I just didn't want to do that this time.
I guess, what is the commission? I guess we should probably ask him.
Mike at the meeting on Monday, he told them,
Okay.
we're over 240. And most of the commissioners would understand. Well, we're that far over on our estimates. That's indicative of at least 10 teachers that we need, because they know 20 teachers, and so I think they realize that the more experienced ones do, because they know what that means with our numbers.
Okay,
So.
that's fine. Okay. Rick, did you want to say something?
No, thank you. I changed my mind.
Okay. Leslie, I didn't want to stop you when you were on a roll.
Okay. Oh, I'm done. Oh, no. Well, the other one was the one for the early childhood classroom.
And Jason, you want to say?
Many of you know this, but I want to make sure everyone knows this. EC is the Early Childhood Program for Children with Disabilities, starts at age 3. As opposed to pre-K, which is a different program that is structured at the very beginning and stays at that particular classroom number. EC is students that we must serve when they arrive.
Any questions on any of those? Thank you, Leslie. All right, that appears to be the end of our agenda for the evening.
Let's go, Vince. I got something.
All right, Dan, and then Bob. Vince wins? Vince wins?
6:30.
I would just like to say tonight, I've been observing not 1, 2, 3, or 4 board members texting and on their phones, and that is against board policy. I appreciate if everyone would respect one another and shut the phones off in the board meetings.
I was texting a babysitter, I'm sorry.
I said I didn't point fingers.
Sorry.
I'll point fingers. Okay?
You can look at it.
I understand.
Bill, do you need?
I understand.
I just want to let you guys know, we're going to need to have an attorney-client meeting before the actual board meeting. I'll send something to you by email to remind you closer to the time, but I want to put it on your radar. Looking to schedule around 5:30 or so. You'll probably be already here.
We have an athletic meeting at 5.
At the same time.
Okay.
Can we do it after?
I suppose we'll have to.
After board meeting.
Oh.
Is there anything pertaining to the meeting?
No, not to the meeting. That's the meeting that night. It's about litigation.
We'll work
I
on
was
that.
watching the
We'll work on
Auburn
that.
score.
We'll figure out when.
I was texting when we're here for 3 hours and things got.